Billionaire Michael Harrington sat rigid in first-class seat 1A of Flight 847, his custom-tailored Armani suit wrinkled and sweat-stained, as his 6-month-old daughter Lily screamed with a ferocity that seemed impossible for such a tiny human being. For 2.5 excruciating hours, every passenger on the New York to Los Angeles flight had been subjected to the relentless wailing that no amount of wealth, influence, or desperation could silence. Before we begin, tell me where in the world you're watching from. Drop it in the comments section. I'd love to know. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, because what happens next on this flight will leave you questioning everything. Let's get back to the story. Michael had tried everything his $6.2 billion fortune could buy. He'd videoconferenced with his daughter's pediatrician at 35,000 feet, holding his phone in one hand while bouncing Lily awkwardly with the other as Dr. Patterson's concerned face filled the screen. "Her temperature is normal?" the pediatrician had asked over the crackling connection. "Yes, I checked twice," Michael replied, raising his voice over Lily's screams. "And she's refusing the bottle?" "Violently," Michael confirmed, remembering how Lily had batted away the premium organic formula with surprising force for someone so small. "Mr. Harrington, sometimes babies just need to cry it out. She's probably overstimulated by the flight. Try to stay calm. Babies can sense parental anxiety. Stay calm." Michael had ended the call and wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that advice. He was anything but calm. He'd changed Lily's designer diapers 3 times in the claustrophobic airplane bathroom, an experience that left him sweating and flustered as he tried to manage a squirming, screaming infant on a fold-down changing table barely larger than a briefcase. He'd walked the aisles bouncing her gently, then firmly, then desperately, trying every rhythm and motion he'd ever seen his wife Rebecca use. He'd played curated playlists of award-winning lullabies through his noise-canceling headphones pressed gently against Lily's tiny ears, everything from classical Mozart to contemporary ambient sounds. Nothing worked. If anything, Lily's cries only grew louder, more desperate, more visceral. The other first-class passengers were no longer trying to hide their hostility. In seat 2B, directly across the aisle, venture capitalist Patricia Chen had abandoned all pretense of politeness. She was typing furiously on her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers attacking the keyboard with barely contained rage. Michael caught glimpses of her screen, texts to colleagues complaining about the inconsiderate parent ruining her flight, followed by what looked like a strongly worded email to the airline about their policies regarding infants in first class. Behind him, elderly businessman Robert Fletcher and his wife Margaret had given up on their attempt to sleep. Robert checked his expensive watch dramatically every few minutes, sighing loud enough to be heard over Lily's cries. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be allowed in first class," Margaret muttered, her voice pitched just loud enough for Michael to hear. "Some people have no consideration for others. If you can't control your child, you shouldn't bring them on a plane," Robert added, his tone dripping with judgment. Michael felt his face burning with a mixture of embarrassment, anger, and exhaustion. These were people from his own world, wealthy, influential individuals who moved in the same circles, who understood that life sometimes threw curveballs beyond anyone's control. Or at least, he'd thought they understood. But their judgment felt particularly harsh because Michael was failing at something that seemed to come naturally to every other parent he'd ever observed. He was Michael Harrington, for God's sake. The 40-year-old founder and CEO of Harrington Capital Management, one of Wall Street's most successful hedge funds. He managed over $6.2 billion in assets, commanded a team of 150 employees, and had built his reputation on staying calm under pressure and solving problems that others deemed impossible. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals with ruthless precision, predict market crashes with uncanny accuracy, and had once talked a suicidal investor off a ledge, literally, during the 2008 financial crisis. Yet he couldn't figure out how to comfort his own 6-month-old daughter. The flight attendants had been helpful at first, offering suggestions with professional smiles that barely masked their growing concern about the disruption to other passengers. Sometimes babies just need to cry it out. One attendant named Sarah had suggested diplomatically during hour 1, bringing Michael a glass of water he didn't have the hands to drink. "Have you tried walking with her?" Another attendant asked during hour 2, as if Michael hadn't been pacing the aisles like a caged animal for the past 40 minutes. "White noise might help," a third attendant offered, appearing with a small portable speaker that played ocean sounds. Michael had tried it. Lily's screams intensified, as if she found the waves personally offensive. Even the pilot had eventually weighed in. 20 minutes ago, Captain Morrison's voice had crackled over the intercom with a message that made Michael want to disappear into his premium leather seat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we understand that air travel can be stressful for passengers of all ages. We ask for your patience and cooperation as we work to ensure all passengers have a comfortable journey. We'll be landing in Los Angeles in approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. Everyone in first class knew exactly who that announcement was directed at. Michael had felt every eye in the cabin turn toward him and Lily, their collective resentment palpable. The worst part wasn't the judgment from strangers or the professional concern from flight attendants. The worst part was watching Lily's distress and feeling completely helpless to fix it. Every wail seemed to express not just physical discomfort but a deeper need that Michael didn't understand how to meet. Her little face was red and scrunched, tears streaming down her cheeks, her tiny body rigid with tension. She'd been such a happy baby at home, gurgling and smiling at everything. This desperate, inconsolable creature in his arms felt like a stranger. This wasn't supposed to be Michael's problem to solve alone. His wife Rebecca was supposed to be on this flight. They'd planned this Los Angeles trip together, 4 days of critical investor meetings that could determine Harrington Capital Management's expansion into Asian markets. 2 years of careful negotiation, strategic planning, and relationship building had led to this moment. The meetings represented potentially $2 billion in new investment from a consortium of Asian investors, money that would catapult their fund into the top tier of global hedge funds. But 3 days ago, Rebecca's own tech startup had hit a crisis. Her co-founder had threatened to quit, threatening to take half their engineering team with him. An emergency board meeting had been called, and Rebecca, as CEO, had no choice but to stay in New York. "I can reschedule the LA meetings," Michael had told her as she'd paced their apartment, stress radiating from every gesture. "Absolutely not," Rebecca had replied firmly. "This deal is too important for your company's future. Take Lily with you. How hard can it be to manage a baby for 4 days? You're brilliant at everything else. How hard can it be?" Those words haunted Michael now, mocking him from every corner of his sleep-deprived mind. Their full-time nanny, Maria, was supposed to travel with them. Michael had planned to focus on his meetings while Maria handled all the actual baby care. But Maria had called at 5:30 that morning, her voice weak and apologetic, explaining that she'd been up all night with what her doctor suspected was the flu. No way could she travel. No way could she risk getting Lily sick. With his flight leaving at 9 a.m. and no time to find a replacement, Michael had made what seemed like a practical decision: bring Lily alone, manage her during the flights and evenings, and hire a local nanny in Los Angeles for the meeting days. He'd even felt a small surge of confidence as he'd boarded the plane. He was Michael Harrington. He'd built a billion-dollar company from scratch. He'd survived the 2008 crash, the 2020 pandemic market chaos, and countless other crises. Surely he could manage one baby for 5 hours. For the first hour of the flight, his confidence had seemed justified. Lily had slept peacefully in her first-class bassinet while Michael reviewed contracts and financial projections on his laptop. He'd felt almost smug, imagining how he'd tell Rebecca that she'd worried for nothing. How hard could it be, indeed? Then Lily had woken up screaming, and Michael's confidence had evaporated like morning fog under a merciless sun. Now, as the third hour of crying stretched toward its final minutes, Michael's panic extended far beyond the immediate situation. He had his first investor meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., a breakfast session with Li Chen and his partners from Shanghai Capital Group. Then lunch with the Singapore delegation. Then afternoon presentations to the Tokyo investors. 4 days of back-to-back meetings with people who controlled billions of dollars and who expected professionalism, preparation, and unshakable competence. How was he supposed to conduct those meetings if he couldn't get Lily to stop crying? He couldn't bring a screaming baby into boardrooms filled with potential investors. He couldn't show up exhausted and frazzled, smelling of spit-up and desperation. The local nanny agencies he'd contacted from the plane had all said the same thing. They might be able to find someone in a few days, but not immediately. Not tomorrow. His entire Asian expansion deal, 2 years of work, billions in potential investment, could collapse because he couldn't figure out how to comfort his own child. Michael looked down at Lily, whose face was now a deep shade of crimson from crying. Her tiny fists were clenched, her mouth open in another endless wail. He felt tears of frustration burning behind his own eyes. What kind of father couldn't help his own daughter? What kind of man failed at something so fundamental? He was about to try walking the aisles again, anything to escape the hostile stares and whispered complaints, when he felt a presence beside his seat. Michael looked up and saw a 15-year-old black boy standing in the aisle, his worn Nike sneakers scuffed and faded, his backpack visibly patched with duct tape in several places. The teenager stood there quietly, his expression calm and focused, studying Lily with an intensity that made Michael pause mid-bounce. The boy didn't belong in first class. That much was immediately obvious from his clothing, his demeanor, the way he stood with careful respect at the edge of Michael's personal space. But there was something in his eyes, a maturity and purpose that cut through Michael's exhaustion and caught his attention. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said softly, his young voice somehow cutting through Lily's screams. "I think I might be able to help." Michael stared at this unexpected visitor, his exhausted mind trying to process the absurdity of the situation. A teenager from economy class was offering to solve a problem that had defeated him completely, a problem that trained pediatricians, experienced flight attendants, and all the resources money could buy hadn't been able to fix. He should probably say no. Should probably question why a stranger, especially a teenage boy, was approaching him about his baby. Should probably worry about protocol, propriety, safety, all the things that mattered in the carefully controlled world he usually inhabited. But Michael was so exhausted, so desperate, so utterly defeated, that all those considerations evaporated in an instant. "Please," Michael said, his voice cracking with relief and exhaustion. "If you think you can help, I'm willing to try anything." The teenager nodded, a small smile crossing his face, and reached toward the screaming baby with hands that moved with surprising confidence and care. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment, this desperate act of trust between a billionaire and a teenager from the Bronx, was about to change both their lives forever. What happened next defied all logic and expectation. The moment Ethan Johnson's hands made contact with Lily, her screaming began to diminish. It wasn't gradual, it was almost immediate, as if the teenager had found some invisible switch that no one else knew existed. Michael watched in stunned disbelief as Ethan lifted Lily from his arms with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone so young, positioning her in a way Michael had never seen before. Ethan cradled Lily's head and neck with his left hand, supporting her in an almost vertical position against his chest. With his right hand, he began applying gentle, rhythmic pressure along her spine. Not patting, not rubbing, but something in between. His fingers moved with practiced precision, finding specific points along her tiny back and pressing with careful deliberation. Starting at the base of her neck, moving down between her shoulder blades, then lower to the middle of her back, each touch deliberate and measured. Babies with colic often have trapped gas and digestive discomfort, Ethan explained quietly, his voice barely above a whisper as he worked. This position helps release the pressure while the massage stimulates their digestive system. The key is staying calm and steady. Babies can feel tension in your hands. Lily's cries reduced from desperate wails to confused whimpering, then to soft hiccups that shook her tiny body. Then, impossibly, to complete, absolute silence. The entire first-class cabin held its breath. Michael could feel it, the sudden collective suspension of disbelief as 200 passengers waited to see if this impossible quiet would actually last. Even the ambient hum of the aircraft engines seemed to fade into the background, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. Ethan began humming a soft, melodic tune that Michael had never heard before. It wasn't a traditional lullaby. The melody was simpler, more rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The teenager's voice was surprisingly steady and soothing, each note seeming to wrap around Lily like an invisible blanket. Lily's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in distress for what felt like an eternity, slowly began to open. She blinked several times, her long lashes still wet with tears, and then her gaze focused on Ethan's face. For the first time since takeoff, for the first time in 2.5 hours of relentless crying, she looked peaceful, almost content. Her little mouth, which had been open in an endless wail, closed into a soft O of curiosity. Michael stared at this mysterious teenager, barely able to process what he was witnessing. His exhausted mind kept trying to find rational explanations and coming up empty. This wasn't possible. Trained pediatricians couldn't do this. Experienced nannies couldn't do this. He himself, with all his problem-solving abilities and resources, couldn't do this. Yet this 15-year-old boy from economy class had accomplished it in less than 2 minutes. "How did you?" Michael whispered, his voice filled with awe and confusion. "What did you just do?" Ethan smiled gently, continuing the soothing back massage in slow, circular motions now that the initial pressure points had been addressed. "My baby brother had severe colic, sir. Took me 8 months to figure out what actually worked. Sometimes babies need specific pressure points relieved, combined with calm, steady energy rather than anxious movement." He shifted Lily slightly, adjusting his hold so her head rested more comfortably against his shoulder. Most people bounce babies when they cry, trying to jiggle them into calmness. But for colicky babies, that extra movement just adds to their overstimulation. They need the opposite: gentle, steady pressure and calm energy. Michael looked around the cabin and saw something remarkable. Every single passenger in first class was staring at them, not with the annoyance and hostility from before, but with amazement and visible gratitude. Patricia Chen, the venture capitalist who had been typing angry messages just minutes ago, had put down her phone entirely, her expression transformed into something like wonder. The elderly couple behind him, Robert and Margaret Fletcher, were leaning forward in their seats, their earlier judgment replaced by astonishment. "Remarkable," Robert Fletcher said quietly to his wife. "Absolutely remarkable." Margaret nodded, her eyes wide. "I've never seen anything like that in my life." The flight attendants had gathered near the galley, watching the scene with professional amazement. Sarah, who had tried so hard to help earlier, had her hand over her mouth, looking like she'd just witnessed a miracle. Even the passengers from economy class who had peeked through the curtain to investigate the sudden silence were staring with expressions of disbelief and relief. Lily gurgled softly, an actual happy sound, and reached up toward Ethan's face with one tiny hand. Her fingers, which had been clenched in distress for hours, were now relaxed and curious, grasping at the air near his chin. Ethan shifted her position slightly so she could see his face better, and Lily's eyes tracked his movements with clear focus and interest. "Where did you learn that song?" Michael asked, still mesmerized by the complete transformation in his daughter. "The humming, what was that?" "My grandmother taught it to me," Ethan replied, his voice soft and respectful. "She said it was a lullaby her mother sang to her when she was a baby in Jamaica. I don't even know if there are words to it, Grandma just hummed it. But when my brother Marcus was crying, it was the only thing that worked consistently once I got the pressure points right." Michael watched as Lily began to relax completely in Ethan's arms. Her tiny fists, which had been clenched and rigid with distress, slowly uncurled. Her breathing, which had been rapid and irregular from hours of crying, became deep and regular. Her eyelids began to flutter, the universal sign of a baby fighting sleep. "How long will she stay calm?" Michael asked, almost afraid to hope. "If she's experiencing what I think she is, a combination of gas pressure and overstimulation, she should sleep peacefully for the rest of the flight," Ethan replied with quiet confidence. "The digestive pressure has been relieved, and she's no longer in that stress cycle where crying makes everything worse." True to Ethan's prediction, Lily's eyes began to close completely. Her body went from rigid to completely relaxed, melting into Ethan's arms like she belonged there. Within another minute, she was asleep, deeply, peacefully asleep in a way that Michael hadn't seen since they'd boarded the plane 3 hours ago. The relief that flooded through Michael was so intense it was almost physical. He felt tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying drain from his shoulders, his neck, his jaw. He wanted to cry, laugh, and sleep all at once. "I don't know how to thank you," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been trying everything for hours." "How did you know what to do?" Ethan's expression became more serious, more reflective. "My family couldn't afford specialists when my brother had colic. We couldn't pay for expensive treatments or medications. So I spent every free hour at the library reading everything I could find about infant digestive issues, massage techniques, calming methods. Then I just experimented, tried different combinations until I found what worked." He looked down at Lily, who was now sleeping so peacefully she looked like a completely different baby. "It took months. A lot of failed attempts. My mom was working double shifts and couldn't be there to help most of the time. My dad? Well, he tries, but babies make him nervous. So it was mostly me figuring it out." Michael found himself studying this teenager with new eyes. Now that the crisis had passed, he noticed details he'd been too overwhelmed to see before. Ethan's backpack, though worn and patched, was covered with patches and pins, robotics club logos, science fair ribbons, math competition medals. Through the partially open zipper, Michael could see notebooks filled with what looked like complex diagrams and equations. There was intelligence in this young man's eyes that went far beyond his years. A maturity and competence that spoke of someone who had been forced to solve adult problems long before most teenagers were worrying about anything more serious than homework and video games. "Who are you?" Michael asked, genuinely curious now. "I mean, I know you said you could help, but who are you really?" The teenager met Michael's eyes directly, with a confidence and honesty that was almost startling. "My name is Ethan Johnson, sir. I'm 15 years old. I'm from the Bronx, South Bronx, specifically. I'm traveling to Los Angeles for a robotics competition at USC. It's actually my first time on an airplane." Michael felt his world shift as he processed this information. This remarkable young man who had just accomplished what seemed impossible wasn't some trained professional or child prodigy from a wealthy family with access to the best resources. He was a 15-year-old from one of New York City's most challenging neighborhoods, traveling alone to pursue a dream, flying for the first time in his life. A robotics competition? Michael asked, his business mind already making connections and seeing patterns. Yes, sir. The USC National Robotics Championship. It's a 3-day competition starting tomorrow. Top prize is a full scholarship to MIT, including living expenses and research opportunities. Ethan's voice carried both pride and nervous energy. I won the regional, state, and national qualifiers to get here. That's incredibly competitive, Michael said, impressed. You must be exceptionally talented. Ethan shrugged modestly, but Michael could see the flash of pride in his eyes. I love building things, solving problems. Whether it's figuring out how to calm a crying baby or designing a robot that can navigate complex environments, it's all just puzzles, you know. Finding the right combination of variables to get the result you need. As Ethan spoke, Michael noticed more details. The teenager's jeans were clean but worn, with careful patches at the knees. His sneakers were name-brand Nikes, but at least 2 years old, the soles worn thin from extensive use. His t-shirt, visible under an unzipped hoodie, advertised a community center robotics program. Everything about him spoke of someone who took care of what he had because replacing things wasn't an option. Yet there was no shame in his bearing, no apology for his circumstances. Just quiet dignity and genuine passion for what he did. Tell me about your robot, Michael said, genuinely curious. What did you design? Ethan's face lit up. The transformation was immediate and striking. I built an affordable search and rescue robot that can be constructed from mostly recycled materials. The whole point is that in actual disaster situations, you need robots that can be built and repaired with whatever's available, not expensive specialized parts. My design uses. He stopped himself, looking suddenly uncertain. Sorry, sir. I don't want to bore you. I know you probably have work to do, and I should probably get back to my seat. No, Michael said quickly, surprising himself with his urgency. Please. I'd like to hear more. And honestly, after what you just did for Lily, you've earned the right to sit in first class for the rest of this flight. He gestured to the empty seat beside him, the seat that should have been Rebecca's. Please, sit down. We still have almost 2 hours until we land. Ethan hesitated, glancing at the first-class passengers around them as if expecting someone to object. But Patricia Chen smiled and nodded encouragingly. The Fletchers behind them did the same. Even the flight attendants seemed to approve, Sarah giving Ethan a warm smile and a thumbs up. If you're sure, sir, Ethan said, carefully settling into the leather seat while still holding the sleeping Lily with practiced ease. As Ethan sat down, Michael found himself looking at this remarkable teenager with growing fascination and respect. In his business career, he'd become skilled at identifying exceptional people quickly, individuals with rare combinations of intelligence, character, and drive. Everything about Ethan Johnson triggered those instincts that had served Michael so well in building his empire. But more than that, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, genuine curiosity about another person's story. Not for business purposes, not for networking or advantage, but because he sensed he was in the presence of someone truly extraordinary. So tell me about this robot, Michael said, adjusting his position so he could see both Ethan and the peacefully sleeping Lily. Start from the beginning. How does a 15-year-old from the Bronx become qualified for a national robotics championship? Ethan took a deep breath, his expression becoming more animated. Well, sir, it started when I was about 11 years old. As Ethan began to share his story, neither of them realized that this conversation, This unexpected connection between two people from completely different worlds was about to become the most important meeting of both their lives. The crying had stopped. The crisis had passed. But the real story was just beginning. As Lily slept peacefully in Ethan's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of deep sleep, Michael found himself leaning forward in his seat, genuinely captivated by the story unfolding before him. "Well, sir, it started when I was about 11 years old," Ethan began, his voice soft so as not to disturb the baby. "I live in the South Bronx with my mom, my dad, and my 3 younger siblings, 2 sisters and a brother. We have a 2-bedroom apartment in subsidized housing on 138th Street. Michael nodded, encouraging him to continue, trying not to let his expression reveal how moved he already was by the picture Ethan was painting. "My mom, Maria, works as a hospital janitor at Bronx, Lebanon," Ethan continued. "She does the night shift mostly, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., because it pays a little more. My dad, James, used to work construction. He was a steel worker, actually. Really skilled, could do things with metal that seemed impossible." Ethan's expression became more somber. "But 3 years ago, he fell from scaffolding on a job site in Manhattan. Broke his back in 2 places, shattered his right arm. The company he worked for was cutting corners on safety equipment, but they had lawyers who made the whole thing go away. Dad got a small settlement that barely covered the medical bills. Now he's on permanent disability. He can walk, but his right arm—" Ethan trailed off, looking down at his own hands. "It doesn't work right anymore. Chronic pain, limited mobility. Can't do the work he trained his whole life to do." Michael felt a tightness in his chest. In his world of billion-dollar deals and market strategies, it was easy to forget that for millions of families, one accident, one medical crisis, could change everything. "I'm sorry," Michael said quietly. "That must be incredibly difficult for your family." Ethan nodded. "It is. But Dad's the strongest person I know. He never complains, never gives up. He just adapted. Does what he can. Helps with my siblings when Mom's working. Teaches me things about building, about engineering, about not letting circumstances define what you can become." "How old are your siblings?" Michael asked. "My sisters are 7 and 9, Jasmine and Keisha. And then there's Marcus, he's 2 now." Ethan looked down at Lily, a small smile crossing his face. "Marcus is why I knew how to help your daughter." "The colic you mentioned?" "Severe colic," Ethan confirmed. "Started when he was about 3 weeks old. He would scream for hours, 6, 7, 8 hours straight sometimes. My mom was already exhausted from working nights, and she'd come home to a screaming baby and no sleep during the day. My dad was dealing with chronic pain from his injuries, and the crying made it worse. My sisters were too young to help, and He paused. "I felt helpless. Watching my family fall apart because none of us knew how to help this tiny baby who was clearly suffering." Michael glanced at Lily, sleeping so peacefully now, and tried to imagine 8 hours of the crying he'd just experienced. The thought was overwhelming. "We couldn't afford specialists," Ethan continued. "My mom's insurance from the hospital is basic, covers emergencies but not much else. The pediatrician we saw said it was normal colic, that Marcus would grow out of it, just be patient. But patient doesn't help when nobody in your house has slept in 3 weeks and your mom's falling asleep on her feet at work." "So what did you do?" Michael asked, though he was beginning to understand. "I went to the library," Ethan said simply. "Every day after school, I'd go to the Mott Haven Library and read everything they had about infant digestive issues, colic remedies, massage therapy, anything that might help. Mrs. Rodriguez, the librarian, started pulling books for me, helping me search medical databases. I filled 3 notebooks with information." He shifted Lily slightly, adjusting his hold with practiced ease. Then I just started experimenting. Tried different holding positions, different massage techniques, different combinations of pressure and movement. Failed a lot at first. Marcus would cry even harder sometimes. But slowly I started to figure out what worked. The specific pressure points along the spine that seemed to release gas. The holding position that took pressure off the digestive system. The calm, steady energy instead of anxious bouncing. How long did it take you to develop the technique I just watched? Michael asked, fascinated. 8 months, Ethan replied. 8 months of trial and error, of keeping detailed notes about what worked and what didn't. But eventually I got it. I could stop Marcus's crying in under 5 minutes, almost every time. My grandmother started calling me Magic Hands. He smiled at the memory. Word spread in our building, then our block. Suddenly, I was the kid people called when their babies wouldn't stop crying. I've probably helped calm 20 different babies in our neighborhood over the past year. Michael stared at this 15-year-old, trying to process the level of dedication, intelligence, and compassion required to accomplish what Ethan had just described. Most teenagers would have bought noise-canceling headphones and ignored the problem. Ethan had taught himself infant massage therapy through library research and systematic experimentation. That's extraordinary, Michael said. But you said you're going to USC for robotics, not medicine. How did you get into engineering? Ethan's entire demeanor changed. His eyes lit up with unmistakable passion. That started even earlier, actually. When I was 11, I found a broken radio in the trash behind our building. I took it apart just to see how it worked, and I realized I could understand the circuits, the connections. It was like reading a language I didn't know I could speak. He gestured with his free hand, careful not to disturb Lily. I started collecting broken electronics from trash bins, yard sales, anywhere I could find them. Took them apart, figured out how they worked, started combining pieces to build new things. My first robot was made from a broken remote control car, an old computer mouse, and parts from a discarded microwave. It could navigate around obstacles using a simple sensor system I built from scratch. Self-taught? Michael asked, though he already knew the answer. Mostly yes, sir. YouTube videos, library books, online forums where engineers would answer questions. My school doesn't have a strong STEM program. We barely have working computers in our lab. But the Mott Haven Community Center started a robotics club 3 years ago. Mr. Patterson, who runs it, he's an engineer who volunteers his time. He saw what I was building and started teaching me more advanced concepts. Gave me access to better tools, introduced me to competition robotics. Ethan's voice grew more animated. I entered my first competition when I was 12, the Bronx Regional Robotics Challenge. My robot was held together with duct tape and hot glue, competing against teams with $1,000 bills. But my design was smarter, more efficient. I won first place. Let me guess, Michael said, already impressed. You kept winning. Local, regional, state level, Ethan confirmed. Each competition got harder, but each one taught me more. This USC championship is the biggest one. Teams from all 50 states, some international competitors. The winner gets a full scholarship to MIT, including housing, living expenses, and a position in their robotics research lab. Michael could hear the weight of that opportunity in Ethan's voice. That would be life-changing. It would be everything, Ethan said quietly. It's not just about me, though. My whole neighborhood is invested in this. When I qualified for the national championship, the cost to get here was $1,200, plane ticket, competition fees, hotel. My family doesn't have that kind of money. We barely make rent most months. So what did you do? Michael asked, though again he suspected he knew. My mom started a GoFundMe campaign. Pastor Williams at our church organized bake sales. The barber shop on our corner put out a donation jar. Mr. Chin, who runs the bodega, donated directly. People in my building who are struggling themselves put in $5, $10, whatever they could spare. Ethan's voice became thick with emotion. It took 2 months, but we raised $1,200. Every dollar represents someone believing in me, investing in my future when they could barely afford their own present. Michael felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of what it meant to carry not just your own dreams, but the dreams of an entire community. "What's your project for the competition?" Michael asked. Ethan's expression became intensely focused. "I designed an affordable prosthetic arm controlled by brain signals, neural interface technology. Most prosthetics like this cost $50,000 or more, which puts them out of reach for people like my dad. My design uses recycled electronics, 3D printed components made from recyclable plastic, and an open-source neural interface system. Total build cost is under $500. Michael's business mind immediately understood the implications. "That's revolutionary. You're talking about democratizing technology that's currently only accessible to the wealthy." "Exactly," Ethan said, his passion evident. "I built the prototype for my dad. It's not perfect yet. The neural interface needs refinement, and the finger articulation could be smoother, but it works. He can grip things, manipulate objects, do some of the detailed work he used to do." Watching him use it for the first time, Ethan's voice cracked slightly. Watching him pick up a wrench and work on something again, after 3 years of not being able to, "That's why I do this." Michael sat back in his seat, overwhelmed by what he was hearing. In his world, he met brilliant people constantly: Harvard MBAs, Ivy League graduates, tech entrepreneurs with venture capital backing. But none of them had shown the combination of raw intelligence, resourcefulness, compassion, and character that this 15-year-old from the Bronx was demonstrating. Ethan wasn't just solving problems. He was solving problems that actually mattered to real people. He wasn't building technology for profit or prestige. He was building it to help his disabled father regain dignity, to help his struggling neighbors access tools they couldn't afford, to lift his entire community. "Ethan," Michael said slowly, his mind already racing ahead to possibilities he hadn't considered 5 minutes ago. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Yes, sir." "When you approached me about Lily, you knew there was a chance I'd reject you. A black teenager from economy approaching a white businessman in first class about his crying baby, you must have known how that could have gone wrong." Ethan met his eyes directly. "Yes, sir. I knew. I sat in my seat for 2 hours, listening to your daughter cry, wrestling with whether I should try to help. I know how people sometimes see me. I know the assumptions that get made. But you came anyway." "I came anyway," Ethan confirmed, "because I knew I could help and it was the right thing to do. My grandmother always says, when you have the ability to help someone, you help them. Period. You don't calculate risk or reward. You just help. I couldn't sit there knowing I could stop that baby's suffering and do nothing just because I was afraid of how you might react." Michael felt something profound settle in his understanding of this remarkable young man. Ethan hadn't just demonstrated technical genius or problem-solving ability. He'd demonstrated moral courage, the willingness to risk rejection and embarrassment to help someone in need. Looking at Lily sleeping peacefully in Ethan's arms, then at the teenager's earnest, intelligent face, Michael found himself making a decision that surprised even him. It wasn't a calculated business decision. It wasn't strategic networking. It was simply a recognition that he was in the presence of someone extraordinary who deserved opportunities that his circumstances would never provide. "Ethan," Michael said, his voice taking on a tone of certainty he recognized from his most important business decisions. "I have a proposition for you." Ethan looked curious but cautious. Sir, I'm in Los Angeles for 4 days of crucial investor meetings. As you've clearly witnessed, I'm completely unprepared to care for Lily while conducting international business negotiations. Michael paused, watching Ethan's reaction carefully. I'd like to hire you as Lily's caregiver during my Los Angeles trip. I'll pay you $300 per day, provide you with transportation to and from your competition, and ensure you have everything you need to perform your best. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. $300 per day? Sir, that's more money than my mother makes in a week. It's what a professional nanny would cost in Los Angeles, Michael replied. And frankly, you've already proven you're more skilled with Lily than any professional I could hire. But more than that. He leaned forward, his expression becoming more intense. I recognize something in you, Ethan. Something rare and valuable. And I want to discuss how I might support your future beyond just these 4 days. Ethan stared at him, processing the implications of what Michael was offering. In his arms, Lily shifted slightly, making a small contented sound before settling back into peaceful sleep, a perfect symbol of the trust and connection that had formed between them in the past hour. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment, this unexpected offer exchanged at 35,000 feet between two people who should never have met, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would transform both their lives in ways neither could imagine. $300 per day? Ethan repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked down at Lily sleeping in his arms, then back at Michael, his expression a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. Sir, that's more money than my mother makes in a week. I can't. Let me explain, Michael interrupted gently, holding up a hand. I'm in Los Angeles for 4 days of critical investor meetings. These meetings represent 2 years of work and potentially $2 billion in new investment for my fund. I need to be completely focused, completely professional. But as you witnessed today, I'm utterly unprepared to manage Lily while conducting international business negotiations. Michael gestured around the first-class cabin, which had returned to its normal quiet hum now that Lily was sleeping. Before you appeared, I was facing the very real possibility of bringing a screaming baby into boardrooms filled with investors from Shanghai, Singapore, and Tokyo. That would have been a disaster. You didn't just save my sanity today, Ethan. You may have saved a deal that affects hundreds of employees and their families. Ethan listened intently, but Michael could see the conflict playing across his young face. But Mr. Harrington, Ethan said carefully, the robotics competition is why I'm here. My entire future depends on my performance. The competition runs for 3 days starting tomorrow morning. If I'm caring for your daughter during... The competition comes first, Michael said firmly, cutting off Ethan's concern. Absolutely, unequivocally, the competition is your priority. I would only need your help during my business meetings and in the evenings when you're not preparing or competing. You'd have complete freedom to focus on winning that MIT scholarship. Michael pulled out his phone, opening his calendar. Look, my first meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m., breakfast with the Shanghai delegation. That's before your competition starts, correct? The opening ceremony is at 10 a.m., Ethan confirmed. Perfect. I'd need you from 7 to 9:30 a.m., which gives you time to get to USC by 10. My afternoon meetings run from 1 to 6 p.m. What's your competition schedule? Ethan thought for a moment. Day 1 is the opening ceremony and initial setup from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Day 2 is the main competition rounds from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Day 3 is finals and awards from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Michael nodded, already calculating. So I'd need you early mornings before competition and evenings after you're done each day. The rest of the time is completely yours, for preparation, for rest, for whatever you need to perform your best. He leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Ethan, I'm not just offering you a babysitting job. I'm offering you a partnership. You help me navigate these crucial 4 days with Lily, and I help you focus on winning that competition without worrying about the financial stress your family is under. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his intelligent eyes studying Michael's face as if trying to determine whether this was too good to be true. There's something else I need to tell you, Michael said, his voice taking on a different tone, more personal, more vulnerable. Something about why this matters to me beyond just solving my immediate childcare crisis. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Ethan, I wasn't born wealthy. I know my suit, my first-class seat, my hedge fund, all of it suggests I came from privilege. But that's not my story. Ethan's attention sharpened, his expression showing genuine curiosity. My parents were immigrants, Michael continued. My father, Joseph, came from Poland with nothing but a suitcase and $200 borrowed from a cousin. He worked in a garment factory in Queens for 30 years. Long hours, low pay, no benefits. My mother, Anna, cleaned offices in Manhattan. She'd leave our apartment at 4 a.m. to take 2 buses to work, then come home at 8 p.m. smelling of cleaning chemicals. Michael looked out the airplane window at the clouds passing below, remembering. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Astoria. I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room until I left for college. My parents spoke broken English and didn't understand the American education system. They couldn't help me with homework or navigate college applications. Everything I achieved, I had to figure out on my own. How did you end up on Wall Street? Ethan asked quietly. Scholarships and mentors, Michael replied simply. I was good at math, obsessed with understanding how money worked. A teacher at my public high school, Mr. Chen, noticed and helped me apply to Columbia. I got a full scholarship. Without that, college would have been impossible. Then at Columbia, I met Professor Richard Steinberg. He saw something in me, introduced me to people in finance, helped me get internships, opened doors I couldn't have opened myself. Michael turned back to Ethan, his eyes intense. Without Mr. Chen and Professor Steinberg, I'd probably be working in that same garment factory my father worked in. They didn't just give me money, they gave me access, knowledge, connections. They believed in my potential when I was just a poor kid from Queens who was good with numbers. And now you want to do the same for me, Ethan said, understanding dawning in his expression. I want to do more than that, Michael said. My company, Harrington Capital Management, has a foundation, the Harrington Capital Foundation for Educational Excellence. We provide scholarships and mentorship to exceptionally gifted students from underserved communities. Full tuition, living expenses, internship opportunities, mentorship from professionals in their fields of interest. He pulled out a business card from his wallet, handing it to Ethan. Regardless of how you perform in the robotics competition, though I have no doubt you'll perform brilliantly, I want to discuss how the foundation might support your educational goals. MIT, Stanford, wherever you want to go. However we can help you get there. Ethan stared at the business card, his hands trembling slightly. Mr. Harrington, this is overwhelming. Michael supplied. I understand. But Ethan, listen to me carefully. What I witnessed today wasn't just technical skill with a crying baby. You demonstrated problem-solving ability, emotional intelligence, courage, and compassion. You risked rejection to help a stranger. You taught yourself advanced skills because your family needed you. You're building technology to help your disabled father regain dignity. These qualities, this combination of character and genius, that's what the foundation looks for. That's what I look for. Before Ethan could respond, the flight attendant, Sarah, approached their seats with an apologetic smile. Gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to prepare for landing. We'll be touching down in Los Angeles in about 20 minutes. Of course, Michael said, nodding. He looked at Ethan. We should probably get Lily back in her bassinet. As if on cue, Lily stirred in Ethan's arms. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, Michael held his breath, half expecting her to start crying again. But instead, Lily blinked up at Ethan's face and made a soft cooing sound. Her tiny hand reached up toward him, fingers grasping at the air near his chin with clear recognition and trust. Hey there, little one, Ethan said softly, adjusting his hold on her. Did you have a good nap? Lily gurgled happily, her eyes bright and alert now, completely transformed from the distressed baby of 3 hours ago. She seemed to recognize Ethan, seemed to trust him in a way that made Michael's chest tighten with emotion. She knows you, Michael said quietly. She feels safe with you. Ethan smiled, gently stroking Lily's soft hair. Babies are smart. They know who's calm, who genuinely cares about them. They're better judges of character than most adults. As Sarah helped them prepare for landing, Michael watched Ethan interact with Lily, the gentle competence, the natural affection, the way his entire demeanor softened when he looked at her. This wasn't someone just trying to earn money. This was someone who genuinely cared, who saw helping others as a fundamental responsibility rather than a transaction. Once they were buckled in with Lily secured in her bassinet, still calm, still content, Ethan turned to Michael with an expression of determined seriousness. Mr. Harrington, he said, his voice steady despite the obvious emotion behind it. I accept your offer. I'll help you care for Lily during your Los Angeles meetings. Relief flooded through Michael. Thank you, Ethan. You have no idea how much. But I have one condition, Ethan interrupted, his eyes meeting Michael's with surprising intensity. Michael paused, intrigued. What condition? Ethan took a deep breath. Whatever money I earn from this, the $300 per day, that's $1,200 total, I want half of it to go toward funding robotics programs for other kids in my neighborhood. Kids who have the ability but not the resources. Kids who deserve the same chances I'm getting. He leaned forward, his passion evident in every word. Mr. Chen at the bodega donated $50 to get me here. Mrs. Rodriguez at the library spent hours helping me research. Pastor Williams organized bake sales. An entire community invested in me when they could barely afford to invest in themselves. If I'm receiving this opportunity, I need to make sure I'm paying it forward. I need to make sure other kids like me get chances too. Michael stared at Ethan, feeling something profound shift in his chest. Here was a 15-year-old who had just been offered more money than he'd probably ever held in his life, and his first instinct wasn't to keep it all. It was to share it with his community. His first thought wasn't about personal gain, it was about systemic change. A smile slowly spread across Michael's face. Ethan, do you know what you just did? Ethan looked uncertain. Sir? You just defined the mission statement I've been looking for, Michael said, his voice filled with genuine excitement. The foundation has always focused on individual scholarships, individual success stories. But you're talking about something bigger, about investing in communities, about creating pathways for multiple students, about building systems that lift everyone rather than just exceptional individuals. He extended his hand toward Ethan. Your condition is accepted, but I'm going to match whatever you contribute. You put $600 toward Bronx robotics programs, I'll put in $600. And we'll work together to figure out how to make that money go as far as possible. Ethan shook Michael's hand, his grip firm despite his obvious emotion. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I don't know what to say. Say you're going to win that robotics competition, Michael replied. Say you're going to show those judges what a kid from the Bronx can accomplish when given a chance. As the plane began its descent, the California coastline becoming visible through the windows, Michael pulled out his phone. Let me get your contact information. Where you staying in Los Angeles? The competition provides dormitory housing at USC, Ethan replied. Shared rooms with other competitors. I'm in the Trojan Hall, room 412. Michael made a note. I'm at the Beverly Wilshire. Here's what I'm thinking. I'll send a car to pick you up tomorrow morning at 6:45 a.m. That gives us time to get Lily situated before my 9 a.m. breakfast meeting. The car will then take you directly to USC for your opening ceremony. Sound good? Ethan nodded, looking slightly overwhelmed by the logistics. Yes, sir. That works. And Ethan? Michael added. Tonight, focus on your competition. Get a good night's sleep. Review your robot design. Do whatever you need to prepare. Don't worry about anything else. Tomorrow morning, we'll figure out the details of our arrangement, but tonight, you focus on you. I will, sir. Thank you. As the plane touched down on the LAX runway, the landing gear making contact with a slight bump, Michael looked over at Ethan and felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine excitement about mentoring someone, about being part of someone's journey rather than just conducting business transactions. In the bassinet between them, Lily yawned and stretched, completely peaceful, completely content. A perfect symbol of how dramatically things could change when the right people found each other at the right moment. The plane taxied toward the gate, and Michael watched Ethan's face as the teenager looked out the window at Los Angeles spreading before them. A city of dreams and opportunities, a place where both their lives were about to change in ways neither could fully imagine. Welcome to Los Angeles, Michael said quietly. Ethan turned from the window, his expression a mixture of nervousness, excitement, and determined hope. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. For everything. For trusting me. For believing in me. Thank you for doing the unthinkable, Michael replied. For having the courage to help when you could have stayed silent. For showing me what real character looks like. As the plane came to a complete stop and passengers began gathering their belongings, Michael and Ethan exchanged phone numbers and final details. Michael gave Ethan his direct cell number, something he rarely did, and Ethan saved it with slightly shaking hands. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Michael said as they prepared to depart. 6:45 a.m. sharp. My driver's name is Robert. He'll have a sign with your name. I'll be ready, Ethan promised. They stood, and Michael carefully lifted Lily from her bassinet. She immediately looked around for Ethan, her eyes finding him and lighting up with recognition. Ethan gently touched her tiny hand, and Lily gripped his finger with surprising strength. See you tomorrow, little one, Ethan said softly. As they walked off the plane together, a billionaire, a teenager, and a baby who had brought them together, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made one of the most important decisions of his life. Not a business decision. Not a strategic calculation. But a human decision. A decision to see potential where others might have seen only circumstance. A decision to open doors instead of closing them. They parted ways in the terminal, Michael heading toward the luxury car service area, Ethan toward the shuttle bus to USC. But before they separated completely, Michael turned back. Ethan, he called. Ethan turned, his worn backpack over one shoulder. Go win that competition, Michael said. Show them what you can do. Ethan grinned, his whole face transforming with confidence and determination. I will, sir. I promise. As Michael watched Ethan disappear into the crowd of travelers, Lily sleeping peacefully against his shoulder, he pulled out his phone and texted his assistant. Cancel the nanny agency search. I found someone better. Much better. Then he added a second text. Also, schedule a meeting with the foundation board. I have a new initiative to propose. The California sun was setting as Michael's car pulled away from the airport, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring investor meetings, robotics competitions, and the beginning of a partnership that neither Michael nor Ethan fully understood yet. But sometimes the most important moments in life don't come with warnings or preparations. Sometimes they come in the form of a crying baby on an airplane and a 15-year-old brave enough to offer help when help is needed most. Sometimes the unthinkable is exactly what needs to happen. Michael Harrington woke at 5:30 a.m. in the penthouse suite of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles stretching toward the Pacific Ocean. The suite was larger than most apartments, 3,000 square feet of marble floors, designer furniture, and luxury that cost $4,500 per night. His personal assistant, Jennifer, had already laid out his schedule on the dining table, meetings with 3 different investor groups, each representing hundreds of millions in potential capital. In the master bedroom, his $5,000 Tom Ford suit hung perfectly pressed, his Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. On the kitchen counter, a private chef had prepared organic breakfast, smoked salmon, fresh fruit, artisanal coffee. Everything was exactly as it should be in Michael's carefully orchestrated world. Everything except the bassinet beside his bed, where Lily was just beginning to stir. Across town at USC's Trojan Hall, Ethan Johnson woke at 5:45 a.m. to the sound of his roommate's alarm clock blaring electronic music. The dormitory room was barely 200 square feet, with 2 sets of bunk beds crammed against opposite walls. Ethan had the bottom bunk, his worn suitcase, corners reinforced with duct tape, shoved underneath. His roommates were still sleeping, 2 competitors from a Seattle private school, 1 from a Dallas Tech Academy, all with matching team jackets and expensive equipment cases. Ethan sat up carefully, trying not to wake anyone, and looked around the sparse room. Gray concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, a single small window that looked out onto a parking lot. It was nothing like the glossy photos on USC's website, but it was free housing for competition participants, and that's all that mattered. He grabbed his phone, an iPhone 6 that he'd bought refurbished 3 years ago, screen cracked but still functional, and quietly slipped into the hallway. At exactly 6 a.m., he FaceTimed his family. His mother answered on the second ring, her face appearing on the small screen. Maria Johnson looked exhausted. She'd just finished her night shift at the hospital, but her eyes lit up when she saw her son. "Me, Joe," she exclaimed, trying to keep her voice down so as not to wake the younger children. "How is California? Did you sleep? Are you eating enough?" "Mom, I'm fine," Ethan said, smiling at her familiar worry. "California is amazing. The competition center is incredible and A small voice interrupted as 2-year-old Marcus pushed his face close to the camera, his chubby cheeks filling the screen. "The home?" Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Not yet, buddy. But soon. Are you being good for Mama?" Marcus nodded vigorously, then pressed his lips to the phone screen in a wet kiss. "He misses you," Maria said, pulling Marcus back. "We all do. But we're so proud of you, Mijo. My baby, competing in California." "Is Dad awake?" Ethan asked. Maria turned the camera, and Ethan saw his father, James, sitting at their small kitchen table. Even through the phone screen, Ethan could see the lines of chronic pain etched in his father's face, the way his right arm hung awkwardly at his side. "Hey, son," James said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Big day today, huh?" "Opening ceremony at 10, Ethan confirmed. "Then we start working on our robots." "You're going to show them what Bronx kids can do," James said firmly. "You hear me? Those fancy private school kids with their expensive equipment, they don't have what you have. They don't have your heart, your determination. You remember that." "I will, Dad." His sisters, Jasmine and Keisha, crowded into view, both talking at once about how all their friends at school were asking about Ethan, how their teachers were following the competition online, how everyone in the neighborhood was rooting for him. The bodega has a sign in the window, Keisha reported excitedly. It says, "Good luck, Ethan Johnson, Bronx champion." Pastor Williams announced it at church, Jasmine added. Everyone clapped. Maria's expression became more serious. "Me, Joe, I heard about what happened on the plane. About the baby. About the man who hired you." She paused. "Don't forget where you come from, okay? Don't let that world change who you are." "I won't, Mama. I promise." "But also," she continued, her voice softening, "don't be afraid to accept help when it's offered with a good heart. Pride can be as dangerous as forgetting your roots. You understand?" "Yes, Mama." After a few more minutes of conversation, his sisters making him promise to take pictures, Marcus crying when he had to say goodbye, Ethan ended the call and sat in the empty hallway, feeling the weight of his family's hopes pressing down on his shoulders like a physical force. At 8:30 a.m., Ethan stood in the USC Robotics Center, surrounded by 200 teams from around the world, and felt his confidence begin to crack. The competition space was enormous, a converted gymnasium filled with workstations, tool stations, and a massive obstacle course designed to simulate a disaster zone. Teams were unpacking their equipment, and everywhere Ethan looked, he saw resources he couldn't imagine having access to. The team from Silicon Valley Academy had matching polo shirts with their school logo, rolling toolboxes worth thousands of dollars, and robots built with pristine components clearly purchased new for this competition. Their faculty advisor wore a Stanford engineering hoodie and was demonstrating something on a tablet to his students. The international team from South Korea had sleek matching jackets, professional-grade equipment cases, and robots that looked like they'd been engineered in corporate labs. They worked with quiet efficiency, their movements coordinated and practiced. The team from Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire was being filmed by what looked like a professional documentary crew. Their robot featured advanced sensors and actuators that Ethan knew cost hundreds of dollars each. And then there was Ethan. Alone. No team, no matching shirt, no faculty advisor. Just his worn backpack, his salvage parts robot wrapped carefully in an old towel, and a toolbox he'd assembled from yard sales and donations. He found his assigned workstation, number 47, and carefully unpacked his robot. Compared to the gleaming machines around him, his creation looked exactly like what it was, something built from trash and recycled electronics. The frame was constructed from old bicycle parts. The motors came from broken remote control cars. The sensor array was cobbled together from components harvested from a discarded smartphone and an old computer mouse. Everything was held together with a combination of hot glue, zip ties, and sheer determination. "Did you build that from trash?" A voice behind him asked, not curious but mocking. Ethan turned to see 3 boys from the Silicon Valley team, all wearing expensive sneakers and designer glasses, looking at his robot with barely concealed amusement. "Yes," Ethan replied quietly, meeting their eyes. "Because that's what people have after disasters, trash and limited resources. My design philosophy is about creating robots that can be built anywhere, repaired with common materials, and actually help people in real-world situations." The boys exchanged glances, clearly not expecting such a confident response. "Well," one of them said, recovering his superiority, "good luck competing against actual professional-grade equipment." As they walked away laughing, Ethan felt doubt creep in like cold water. What was he doing here? These kids had resources, training, support systems he couldn't even imagine. They probably had parents who were engineers, access to university labs, budgets that exceeded his family's annual income. He was a kid from the Bronx with a robot built from garbage, competing against the best-funded teams in the world. The opening ceremony began at 10 a.m. Dr. Raymond Mitchell, the competition director, took the stage, a tall man with gray hair and an infectious enthusiasm for robotics. Welcome to the USC National Robotics Championship. His voice boomed through the speakers. You represent the best young minds in robotics from all 50 states and 12 countries. Over the next 3 days, you'll face a challenge designed to test not just your technical skills, but your creativity, problem-solving ability, and commitment to using technology for good. The massive screen behind him lit up, showing a simulated disaster zone, collapsed buildings, debris-strewn streets, areas marked as dangerous or inaccessible to humans. Your challenge, Dr. Mitchell continued, is to build an autonomous robot capable of navigating this disaster zone, locating simulated victims, and delivering rescue supplies. Your robots must operate independently, make real-time decisions, adapt to changing conditions, and complete their missions within a 15-minute time window. The screen showed detailed specifications, obstacles to navigate, victims to locate, supplies to deliver, points awarded for speed, accuracy, and innovation. You have 3 days, Dr. Mitchell concluded. Day 1, design and initial build. Day 2, testing and refinement. Day 3, final competition and demonstrations. The winning team receives a full scholarship to MIT, including research opportunities at their world-renowned robotics lab. Good luck to you all. As teams rushed back to their workstations, already discussing strategies and making design plans, Ethan stood still for a moment, feeling overwhelmed. Then he thought about his father's words, "They don't have what you have. They don't have your heart." He thought about Marcus, his baby brother, crying for months until Ethan figured out how to help him through research and determination. He thought about his neighborhood, Mr. Chen, Pastor Williams, Mrs. Rodriguez, dozens of people who had believed in him enough to invest their hard-earned money in his dream. And he thought about Michael Harrington, a billionaire who had seen something worth investing in beyond just technical skill. Ethan pulled out his notebook, pages filled with calculations, diagrams, refinements he'd been working on for months, and got to work. At 4 p.m., a chauffeur-driven black Mercedes pulled up outside Trojan Hall, and Ethan felt like he was stepping into a different universe. The driver, Robert, a professional man in his 50s wearing a crisp suit, greeted him by name and opened the rear door. "Mr. Johnson, Mr. Harrington is looking forward to seeing you." The car's interior was all leather and polished wood, larger and more luxurious than Ethan's living room at home. As they drove through Los Angeles toward Beverly Hills, Ethan watched the city transform from urban campus to tree-lined streets to neighborhoods where single homes probably cost more than every building on his Bronx block combined. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, uniformed staff, people in designer clothes moving through spaces that looked more like a palace than a hotel. Robert led him to a private elevator that required a key card to access the penthouse level. When the doors opened directly into Michael's suite, Ethan literally stopped breathing for a moment. The space was enormous, larger than his entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Los Angeles that made Ethan feel like he was floating above the city. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. The kitchen had appliances Ethan couldn't even name. "Ethan!" Michael appeared from one of the bedrooms, Lily in his arms. He was dressed more casually than on the plane, expensive jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe, but he smiled warmly. "How was the opening ceremony?" "It was intense," Ethan admitted, still trying not to stare at the absurd luxury surrounding him. "The competition is incredible, Mr. Harrington. Some of these teams have equipment I've only seen in professional labs." "And how's your robot holding up against that competition?" Michael asked, studying Ethan's face. "Honestly, I don't know. My design is solid, but compared to what these other teams have..." He trailed off, not wanting to sound defeated. "Come here," Michael said, gesturing toward the windows. "Bring Lily with you. I need to change for my evening meeting." Ethan carefully took Lily from Michael's arms, and the baby immediately relaxed against him, making a contented sound. As Michael disappeared into the bedroom, Ethan walked to the windows, holding Lily gently. Los Angeles spread out below them like a carpet of lights beginning to twinkle as sunset approached. The Hollywood Hills, downtown skyscrapers, the distant ocean. It was beautiful and alien and overwhelming. "What do you think, Lily?" Ethan whispered to the baby. "This is pretty different from the Bronx, huh?" Lily grabbed his finger, her eyes focused on his face with complete trust. Michael emerged 15 minutes later in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Ethan's mother's salary. "I have a crucial dinner meeting with the Singapore investors at 7 p.m., he explained. "It should last about 2 hours. You okay here with Lily?" "Of course," Ethan said, though being alone in this suite felt surreal. "There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself to anything. Lily's bottles are in the fridge, and she usually eats around 6:30. Her toys are in that basket, and there's a play mat in the corner." Michael paused, studying Ethan's expression. "You look overwhelmed." "I'm fine," Ethan said quickly. "No, you're not," Michael said gently. "And that's okay. This morning you woke up in a dorm room, and now you're in a penthouse suite that costs more per night than most people make in a month. It's a lot to process." Ethan appreciated the honesty. "It is a lot. But I can handle it." "I know you can," Michael said. "But Ethan, don't let anyone, including me, make you feel like you don't belong in spaces like this. Your worth isn't determined by your zip code or your bank account. Remember that." After Michael left, Ethan settled onto the floor with Lily, pulling out some of her toys. He started teaching her simple concepts, colors, shapes, counting, talking to her in the same patient voice he used with Marcus. "See, Lily? This is a red block. Can you say red?" Lily gurgled, reaching for the block. "That's right. And this is blue. Blue like the sky." As Lily played, Ethan found himself walking back to the windows, looking out at the glittering city below. Somewhere out there was the Bronx, thousands of miles away but feeling even more distant than that. And somewhere out there was the USC campus, where tomorrow he would compete against teams with resources and advantages he couldn't match. He thought about what his mother had said, "Don't forget where you come from. Don't let that world change who you are." But standing here, holding a billionaire's baby in a penthouse suite that cost more per day than his family paid for rent in a month, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, did he belong in either world anymore? Was he still the kid from the Bronx? Or was he becoming someone different? Lily made a soft crying sound, pulling him from his thoughts. Ethan immediately recognized it, not distress, just tiredness. He picked her up, cradling her in the specific position that had worked on the plane, applying gentle pressure to her back while humming his grandmother's lullaby. Within minutes, Lily was asleep again, her tiny body relaxed and trusting in his arms. As Ethan stood at the window holding the sleeping baby, Los Angeles twinkling below like a sea of possibilities, he made himself a promise. He wouldn't forget where he came from. But he also wouldn't be afraid of where he was going. Tomorrow, he would show those Silicon Valley teams what a kid from the Bronx could do with creativity, determination, and heart. Tonight, he would do what he'd always done, take care of the people who needed him, whether that was his baby brother Marcus or Michael Harrington's daughter Lily. Because in the end, that's who Ethan Johnson was. Not defined by penthouse suites or dorm rooms. Not limited by expensive equipment or salvaged parts. Just a kid who solved problems, helped people, and refused to let circumstances determine his future. The city lights glittered below, full of challenge and promise, and Ethan was ready for both. Day 2 of the USC National Robotics Championship began at 7 a.m., And Ethan arrived at the competition center with dark circles under his eyes but fire in his determination. He'd spent most of the previous night refining his robot's navigation algorithm, working by the dim light of his phone while his roommates slept, too wired with nervous energy to rest. The workshop buzzed with activity as teams unpacked sophisticated equipment and began serious work on their designs. Ethan found his workstation, number 47, and carefully laid out his tools. Compared to the laser cutters, 3D printers, and computerized testing equipment surrounding him, his collection of screwdrivers, wire cutters, and a borrowed soldering iron looked almost pathetic. At the workstation next to him, the Silicon Valley Academy team was setting up what looked like a mobile engineering lab. Their robot sat on a custom stand, its frame constructed from precision-machined aluminum, its sensors top-of-the-line components that Ethan recognized from robotics magazines he could never afford to buy. Morning Trashbot, one of them, a tall kid named Brandon who seemed to be their leader, called out with a smirk. "Sleep well in your dorm room?" His teammates laughed. Another one, wearing designer glasses and an Apple Watch, added, "We stayed at the Marriott. Our sponsor covered it." "Where's your sponsor?" "The Salvation Army?" Ethan took a deep breath, remembering his father's words about not letting people get under his skin. He focused on his robot, checking connections and testing servo motors. "Hey, I asked you a question," Brandon pressed, walking over to Ethan's workstation. "Did you seriously build that thing from garbage? Because it looks like it belongs in a landfill, not a national championship." Ethan straightened up, meeting Brandon's eyes with calm directness. "Yes, I built it from recycled and salvaged materials. Because that's what people actually have after disasters: trash, limited resources, and desperate need. My design philosophy is about creating solutions that work in real-world conditions, not just in well-funded labs." Brandon's smirk faltered slightly. "Real-world conditions? This is a competition, not the real world." "But the competition simulates disaster response," Ethan replied, his voice steady and professional. "In actual emergencies, you can't order custom parts from aerospace suppliers. You need robots that can be built quickly, repaired easily, and constructed with whatever materials are available. My robot can be replicated anywhere in the world for under $500. How much did yours cost?" Brandon's face reddened. "Price doesn't matter when you're trying to win." "Price always matters," Ethan said quietly, "when you're trying to save lives." He turned back to his work, effectively ending the conversation. Brandon and his teammates retreated to their workstation, muttering among themselves, but Ethan noticed they kept glancing over at him with expressions that had shifted from mockery to something more uncertain. What Ethan didn't notice was that someone else had been watching the exchange with great interest. Dr. Patricia Chin stood near the judge's observation area, a tablet in her hands but her attention fixed on the young man at workstation 47. As a professor at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, she'd judged dozens of robotics competitions over the years. She'd seen brilliant students, well-funded teams, impressive technical demonstrations. But something about this particular competitor intrigued her. She pulled up his file on her tablet. Ethan Johnson, 15 years old, South Bronx, New York. No team affiliation. No faculty advisor. No corporate sponsorship. His robot was registered as RISE-1, Rapid Intervention System for Emergencies, version 1. The technical specifications were unusual. While other teams were incorporating advanced sensors, expensive actuators, and complex AI systems, Johnson's design was elegantly simple: basic obstacle detection using salvaged smartphone components, motor control via recycled servo systems, and a navigation algorithm that seemed to be entirely his own creation. Dr. Chin walked closer to workstation 47, watching as Ethan worked with focused intensity. His movements were efficient, practiced, confident. He wasn't fumbling with tools or consulting reference materials every few minutes like many competitors. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Mr. Johnson?" she said, approaching his workstation. Ethan looked up, startled, and immediately recognized the MIT logo on her lanyard. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Dr. Patricia Chen, one of the competition judges. I've been reviewing your robot specifications. Your navigation algorithm is quite unusual. Can you explain your approach?" Ethan's nervousness was visible, but he took a breath and launched into an explanation that made Dr. Chen's eyebrows rise with interest. Most navigation systems for disaster response robots use complex sensor arrays and machine learning models, Ethan explained, his hands moving as he spoke. But those systems require expensive hardware and significant computational power. My algorithm uses a simplified decision tree based on basic obstacle detection and probabilistic mapping. It's not as sophisticated, but it's fast, efficient, and can run on minimal hardware. Probabilistic mapping with limited sensors, Dr. Chen said thoughtfully. That's a significant challenge. How do you handle uncertainty? I embrace it, Ethan replied, warming to the topic. Instead of trying to create a perfect map of the environment, my robot makes educated guesses and adjusts in real time. It's like how humans navigate in the dark. We don't need to see everything perfectly, we just need enough information to move forward safely. Dr. Chen smiled. That's a remarkably mature understanding of adaptive systems. Where did you learn these concepts? Library books, online courses, trial and error, Ethan said honestly. My school doesn't have a strong robotics program, so most of my learning has been self-directed. Before Dr. Chen could respond, a commotion from across the workshop drew everyone's attention. One of the international teams, a well-funded group from Germany, was having problems with their robot's navigation system. Their sophisticated sensor array kept providing conflicting data, causing their robot to freeze and shut down whenever it encountered complex obstacles. We've been troubleshooting this for 2 hours, their team leader complained to another judge. The sensors are working individually, but the integration algorithm can't resolve conflicts between different data sources. Dr. Chen watched as Ethan listened to their problem, his expression thoughtful. She had a hunch about what he was thinking, and she was curious to see if she was right. By noon, Ethan had made significant progress on his robot. While other teams struggled with complex technical challenges, his simpler approach was proving surprisingly effective. His robot could navigate the practice course with reliable consistency, even if it wasn't the fastest. But it was what happened at 1:30 p.m. that changed everything. The competition organizers had set up a new test obstacle, a section of the disaster zone with multiple conflicting pathways, dead ends, and dynamic obstacles that moved unpredictably. It was designed to test adaptive problem-solving, and it was causing chaos for most teams. The Silicon Valley Academy team went first. Their expensive robot, with its advanced sensors and complex AI, approached the obstacle confidently. Within 30 seconds, it was completely confused, spinning in circles as its sensors provided conflicting information about which path to take. Eventually, it crashed into a barrier and had to be manually reset. Team after team tried and failed. The South Korean team's robot made it further but eventually got trapped in a dead end, unable to backtrack effectively. The German team's robot didn't even start, its sensor conflicts still unresolved. Then it was Ethan's turn. He placed Rise 1 at the starting position, double-checked his control settings, and activated the navigation algorithm. His hands were shaking slightly. He could feel dozens of eyes watching him, judging not just his robot but everything he represented. Rise 1 approached the complex obstacle course with what almost looked like caution. Its simple sensors scanned the environment, its basic motors hummed to life, and then something remarkable happened. Instead of trying to analyze every possible path simultaneously like the more sophisticated robots, Rise 1 simply chose a direction and committed to it. When it hit a dead end, it backed up without hesitation and tried a different route. When obstacles moved, it adapted in real time without freezing. Its movements weren't fancy or fast, but they were effective and relentless. 90 seconds later, Rise 1 emerged from the other side of the obstacle course, the first robot to successfully navigate it. The workshop fell silent. Then Dr. Chen started clapping, and other judges joined in. Even some of the competing teams couldn't help but look impressed. Brandon from Silicon Valley Academy stared at Ethan with an expression that had shifted from mockery to something like grudging respect. "How did you do that?" he asked, genuinely curious now. "Your robot has a fraction of our processing power, but it outperformed our AI." Ethan, still processing what had just happened, managed to explain, "Your robot was trying to find the perfect solution. Mine was just trying to find a solution. Sometimes simple and adaptive beats complex and rigid." Dr. Chen approached his workstation again, this time with several other judges. "Mr. Johnson, that was an impressive demonstration of the principle that elegance often beats sophistication. Your algorithm prioritizes decision-making speed over decision-making perfection. In disaster scenarios, that could save lives." For the rest of the afternoon, Ethan noticed other competitors watching him work. Some with respect, others with barely concealed jealousy. The kid with the trash robot had just outperformed teams with 10 times his resources. At 4 p.m., Robert arrived in the Mercedes to pick up Ethan. As they drove from USC toward Beverly Hills, Lily napped peacefully in her car seat, and Ethan pulled out napkins from the car's storage compartment, sketching improvements to his robot's algorithm. "Productive day, Mr. Johnson?" Robert asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," Ethan replied, still processing everything that had happened. "Really productive." When they arrived at the Beverly Wilshire, Michael was in the middle of a high-stakes video conference with investors from Shanghai, Singapore, and Tokyo. The meeting was being conducted in the suite's dining room, with Michael's laptop positioned so the investors could see him clearly against the backdrop of the luxury suite. Ethan quietly took Lily to the adjoining sitting room, closing the door most of the way to give Michael privacy. He could hear fragments of the conversation, discussions about market projections, investment timelines, risk assessments. Lily was awake now and in good spirits. Ethan laid out her play mat and sat with her, building towers with colorful blocks that she delighted in knocking over. Each time a tower fell, Lily would giggle, a sound so pure and joyful it made Ethan smile despite his exhaustion. "See, Lily, this is called cause and effect," Ethan explained softly as he built another tower. "You knock it down and it falls. Action and reaction. That's basic physics." Lily giggled again, slapping the blocks with both hands. The sound must have carried into the dining room, because Ethan heard one of the investors say something in Mandarin, followed by English. "Is that a baby? Mr. Harrington, I thought this was a serious business meeting." There was a pause. Then Michael's voice, clear and firm, "That is my daughter, Mr. Chen. And the young man caring for her is teaching me more about innovation and problem-solving than most business consultants I've worked with." Another pause. Then a different voice. "You have your child with you in Los Angeles?" "I do," Michael replied. "Because sometimes circumstances require us to adapt, to find creative solutions to unexpected challenges. My daughter's caregiver is a 15-year-old robotics genius from the Bronx who's currently competing in the national championship. He's building disaster response robots from recycled materials, solving complex engineering problems with limited resources. He represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we should be investing in, not just in financial markets, but in human potential." The conference continued, but the tone had shifted slightly. The investors seemed intrigued rather than judgmental. When the meeting finally ended around 6:30 p.m., Michael emerged from the dining room looking exhausted but satisfied. He found Ethan on the floor with Lily, who was now gnawing contentedly on a teething ring. "How did it go?" Ethan asked, carefully standing with Lily in his arms. "Better than expected," Michael said, loosening his tie. "The Singapore group committed to $400 million. Shanghai wants to see more projections, but they're interested. Tokyo is still considering." He paused, studying Ethan's face. "How was your day? How's the competition going?" Ethan hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It's intense, Mr. Harrington. Some of these teams have resources I can't even imagine. Equipment that costs more than my family makes in a year. Corporate sponsors, faculty advisors, professional-grade facilities." "But," Michael prompted, sensing there was more. "But today I realized something," Ethan continued. "My robot might be built from trash, but it works. It's reliable. It's adaptable. While other teams' expensive robots were freezing up and crashing, mine navigated an obstacle course that nobody else could solve." Michael smiled, gesturing for Ethan to sit on the couch. He sat across from him, his expression becoming more serious. "Ethan, can I tell you something about business that applies just as much to robotics?" "Yes, sir." "The best innovations don't come from unlimited resources," Michael said. "They come from creative problem-solving under constraints. When I was starting my hedge fund, I was competing against established Wall Street firms with billions in capital, armies of analysts, and connections I couldn't dream of having. I had a tiny office in Queens, 3 employees, and savings that wouldn't last 6 months. He leaned forward, his intensity growing. But I had something they didn't have: desperation, hunger, and a willingness to think differently. I couldn't compete with them on their terms, so I created my own terms. I found market inefficiencies they ignored because they were too small for their massive operations. I built algorithms that required creativity rather than computing power. I succeeded not despite my constraints, but because of them." Ethan listened intently, seeing parallels to his own situation. "You're not at a disadvantage, Ethan," Michael continued. "Your perspective, building robots that work with limited resources, creating solutions for people who can't afford expensive technology, that's your advantage. Those Silicon Valley teams are solving problems for people like themselves, people with money and resources. You're solving problems for people who actually need help." "But what if that's not enough to win?" Ethan asked quietly. "What if it's more than enough?" Michael countered. "What if the judges recognize that true innovation isn't about who has the most expensive equipment, but about who solves real problems in ways that actually matter?" As if sensing the emotional weight of the conversation, Lily reached out from Ethan's arms toward Michael, then back to Ethan, her little hands opening and closing. She seemed to want both of them, creating a bridge between them. Michael took Lily for a moment, then handed her back to Ethan, watching as the baby immediately relaxed against the teenager's shoulder. "You know what I see when I watch you with Lily?" Michael said softly. "I see someone who genuinely cares about solving problems that matter. You didn't learn to calm crying babies to win competitions or impress people. You learned because your little brother needed help and your family couldn't afford specialists. You're not building robots for glory or profit. You're building them because your father needs a prosthetic arm and other people need affordable solutions." He stood, walking to the window overlooking Los Angeles. "That's not a weakness, Ethan. That's your superpower. You see problems that privileged people never notice, and you solve them in ways that privileged people never consider. Don't let anyone, including yourself, make you think that's not enough." Ethan felt something shift in his chest, the doubt and inadequacy he'd been carrying since arriving in Los Angeles beginning to crack and fall away. "She knows you're special," Michael said, gesturing to Lily, who was now playing with Ethan's fingers. "She trusted you immediately, without question. And I know you're special too. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that competition and show them what a kid from the Bronx can do when he refuses to let circumstances define his limits." At 8 p.m., Robert drove Ethan back to USC. As they pulled up to Trojan Hall, Michael handed Ethan an envelope. "Your payment for today," Michael said. Ethan opened it and stared at the $300 in cash, more money than he'd ever held in his hands at once. 6 $50 bills, crisp and new. "Mr. Harrington, You earned it," Michael said firmly. "And remember our agreement. Half goes to funding robotics programs in your neighborhood, but the other half is yours. Use it however you need to. Competition fees, food, materials, emergency fund. Whatever helps you focus on winning." As Ethan climbed out of the car, Michael called out one more time, "Ethan? Tomorrow's the main competition rounds. Final demonstrations. Everything you've worked for comes down to tomorrow." "I know," Ethan replied, feeling the weight of it. "You're going to be amazing," Michael said with absolute certainty. "I believe in you. Your family believes in you. Your whole neighborhood believes in you. Now you just need to believe in yourself." Back in his dorm room, Ethan's roommates were already asleep. He sat on his bunk, looking at the money in his hands, thinking about everything that had happened in just 2 days. He'd gone from a kid on a plane trying to help a crying baby to someone forming a partnership with a billionaire, someone competing against the best robotics teams in the world, someone holding more money than his mother made in a week. He thought about his father's words, "Show them what Bronx kids can do." He thought about Michael's advice, "Your perspective is your advantage." He thought about his robot, built from trash and determination, sitting in the competition workshop ready for tomorrow's final challenge. And for the first time since arriving in Los Angeles, Ethan felt genuinely, completely confident. Tomorrow he would show them all what was possible when talent met opportunity, when desperation met determination, when a kid from the Bronx refused to accept that his circumstances should limit his dreams. Tomorrow he would compete not just for himself, but for everyone who had believed in him when believing seemed impossible. Tomorrow he would prove that sometimes the most unthinkable thing isn't calming a billionaire's crying baby. It's daring to imagine that you belong anywhere your talent and character can take you. Ethan tucked the money carefully into his suitcase, set his alarm for 5:30 a.m., and finally allowed himself to sleep, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. At 2:47 a.m., Ethan's phone shattered the silence of the dark dorm room with a jarring buzz that pulled him from restless sleep. He grabbed it quickly, trying not to wake his roommates, his heart already racing with the instinctive knowledge that middle-of-the-night calls never brought good news. The screen showed his mother's name. "Mom?" he whispered, stumbling into the hallway. "What's wrong?" The sound that came through the phone made his blood run cold. His mother sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, her words broken and desperate. Mijo, it's your father? He's in the hospital? You need to?" "I don't know what to do." Ethan's legs went weak. He slid down the wall to sit on the cold tile floor, his hand shaking so violently he almost dropped the phone. "Slow down. What happened? Is Dad okay?" He collapsed, Maria managed between sobs. "Around midnight. He was having chest pains, couldn't breathe. I called 911. They rushed him to Bronx, Lebanon. The doctors, Ethan, they found a blood clot. From his old injury. It's been sitting there for months, getting worse, and now they say if it moves to his heart or brain." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "What do the doctors say?" Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. "Can they fix it? Surgery?" "Yes, surgery. Emergency surgery. But his mother's voice cracked completely. The surgery is experimental. His insurance won't cover it. The hospital wants $35,000 upfront before they'll proceed. We have until tomorrow morning to decide, or they'll just do standard treatment, which the doctors say won't work. Ethan, without this surgery, they're saying permanent paralysis at best. At worst. She couldn't say it. His father might die. In the background, Ethan could hear his sisters crying. Then a small voice cut through everything else. Marcus, his 2-year-old brother, calling out, "Where? I want to come home." Marcus wailed, not understanding why his brother wasn't there, why everyone was crying, why nothing made sense anymore. Ethan pressed his forehead against his knees, feeling his world collapse around him like a building in one of his disaster simulations. But this wasn't a simulation. This was real. His father, the strongest person he knew, the man who had taught him everything about building and engineering and never giving up, might die because they couldn't afford $35,000. "Mom, listen to me," Ethan said, forcing his voice to steady even as tears streamed down his face. "I have money. Mr. Harrington paid me $600 for the past 2 days. I'll send it right now. All of it. Me, Joe, that's not even close to enough. And you need that money for the competition for—" "I don't care about the competition." Ethan's voice rose, then dropped back to a whisper. "Dad is more important than anything. I'll figure something out. I'll come home." "Oh, no," his mother said firmly, even through her tears. "Your father would never forgive me if you came home now. The competition finals are tomorrow. This is your future, your scholarship, everything we've. None of that matters if Dad dies." Ethan interrupted, his voice breaking. Maria was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Ethan's chest ache. "I don't know what to do, Joe. I've called everyone I know. The church is trying to organize an emergency fundraiser, but that will take days. Your father's brothers are trying to scrape together money, but they're struggling too. I've applied for every medical loan I can find, but with our credit, Ethan, I don't know how to save him." Those last words, "I don't know how to save him," from his mother, who had always found a way, who had always been strong, who had worked double shifts and sacrificed everything to keep their family afloat, completely destroyed whatever composure Ethan had left. "I'm coming home," he said, his decision made. "I'll get on the first flight I can find." "Me, Joe." "No. Family comes first. That's what you and Dad always taught me. I'll figure out the rest later." After a few more minutes, his mother too exhausted to argue, his sisters saying goodbye through tears, Marcus begging to come home, Ethan ended the call and sat alone in the empty hallway, staring at his phone screen as the reality of his situation crashed over him like waves. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., the competition finals would begin. The final demonstrations. The moment when judges would select the winner of the MIT scholarship, the full ride that would change his entire life, that would lift his family out of poverty, that represented every hope and dream he'd carried for the past 3 years. But in that same moment, his father would be lying in a hospital bed in the Bronx, facing permanent paralysis or death because they couldn't afford the surgery that might save him. There was no choice. Not really. At 3:15 a.m., Ethan sat on his bunk in the dark dorm room, staring at his worn backpack, at the competition badge hanging from his desk lamp, at the notebook filled with months of calculations and refinements for Rise 1. He thought about his robot, sitting in the workshop right now, ready for tomorrow's demonstration. Ready to prove that resourcefulness could beat resources, that creativity could overcome constraints, that a kid from the Bronx could compete with anyone. But his father was dying. Ethan pulled out his laptop and began searching for flights. New York to Los Angeles flights. The earliest departure was 6:30 a.m., too early to make. The next was 2 p.m. That would mean missing the 10 a.m. finals, but he could get home by tonight to be with his family. The price made him feel sick, $847 for a last-minute one-way ticket. He had $600 in cash from Michael, plus $180 in his checking account from various odd jobs. Not enough. He'd have to use the emergency credit card his mother had given him, the one she'd said to only use in absolute emergencies, the one that was already carrying a balance they couldn't afford. With shaking hands, Ethan completed the booking. Departure 2 p.m. from LAX. Arrival 10:30 p.m. at JFK. He'd take the subway straight to Bronx Lebanon Hospital, where his father would be recovering from standard treatment, the treatment the doctors said wouldn't work, because they couldn't afford the surgery that might actually save him. The $600 he had would go straight to his mother to help with whatever medical bills they could pay. It wouldn't make a real difference, not against $35,000, but it was all he had to give. At 4:30 a.m., Ethan began packing his belongings. His worn clothes folded carefully. His notebooks filled with robotics calculations and designs. The competition t-shirt he'd received at registration that he'd never get to wear during finals. He pulled out his phone and opened a new email to Dr. Raymond Mitchell, the competition director. Dear Dr. Mitchell, I regret to inform you that I must withdraw from the USC National Robotics Championship effective immediately due to a family emergency. I want to thank you and all the judges for this incredible opportunity. My robot, Rise 1, will remain at workstation 47 for pickup. I'm sorry I couldn't see this through to the end. Sincerely, Ethan Johnson. His finger hovered over the send button, but he couldn't make himself press it. Not yet. Not while there was still technically time. At 4:45 a.m., Ethan walked through the empty USC campus one last time. The competition center was locked, but through the windows he could see the workshop, dozens of robots sitting at their workstations, ready for tomorrow's finals. He found workstation 47 and pressed his face against the glass, looking at Rise 1. His robot. Built from trash and determination. Built with his father's engineering lessons and his community's hopes. Built to prove that limited resources didn't mean limited potential. And it would never get the chance to prove anything. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, mourning not just his lost opportunity but everything it represented. The MIT scholarship. The chance to lift his family out of poverty. The proof that kids from the Bronx deserved the same opportunities as kids from Silicon Valley. Because life didn't care about fairness or dreams or how hard you worked. At 5 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text message. Michael Harrington. Early breakfast meeting canceled. Can you come at 6 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. for Lily? I'll send Robert to pick you up. Ethan stared at the message, feeling a fresh wave of guilt crash over him. He had to tell Michael he was leaving. Had to explain why he was breaking their agreement, abandoning Lily, walking away from everything Michael had offered him. With trembling hands, he typed his response. Mr. Harrington, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. I can be there at 6 a.m. The reply came immediately. Is everything okay? Ethan couldn't answer that honestly, so he just wrote, I'll explain when I see you. At 6 a.m., Robert picked up Ethan from Trojan Hall. The driver took one look at Ethan's face, red-eyed, exhausted, devastated, and didn't ask questions, just drove in respectful silence toward Beverly Hills. When Ethan arrived at the penthouse suite, Michael opened the door immediately, still in pajamas and a robe, Lily in his arms. He took one look at Ethan and his expression shifted from welcoming to concerned. What happened? Michael asked, stepping aside to let Ethan in. Ethan walked into the suite that had seemed so amazing just yesterday and now felt impossibly distant from everything that mattered. He couldn't make himself sit down. He just stood there, backpack over one shoulder, trying to find words. Mr. Harrington, I'm so sorry. I have to withdraw from the competition. I have to go home. Right now. Today. Michael set Lily carefully in her play area and turned his full attention to Ethan. Tell me what's going on. So Ethan told him everything. About the phone call at 2:47 a.m. About his father collapsing, about the blood clot from his old construction injury, about the experimental surgery that might save his life. About the $35,000 they didn't have, the insurance that wouldn't cover it, the impossible choice between standard treatment that wouldn't work and a surgery they couldn't afford. His voice broke multiple times as he explained. The competition finals are at 10 a.m. But I have a flight at 2 p.m. I need to get home to my family. My father, Mr. Harrington, he might die. Michael listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. I know I'm breaking our agreement, Ethan continued, tears streaming down his face now. I know you hired me to help with Lily, and I'm abandoning you right before your biggest meetings. I'm so sorry. I'll give back the money you paid me, all $600, that can go toward my father's surgery, and maybe that plus whatever the church raises and what my family can scrape together. He trailed off, knowing how futile it all sounded. $600 against $35,000. It was like trying to fill an ocean with a cup. Here, Ethan said, pulling out his phone. I booked a flight. Leaves at 2 p.m. I'll miss the finals, I'll lose my chance at the MIT scholarship, but none of that matters if my father... He couldn't finish. Michael was quiet for a long moment, his eyes studying Ethan's face with an intensity that made Ethan feel like he was being evaluated somehow. How much does your father need? Michael asked quietly. $35,000, Ethan replied. But Mr. Harrington, I'm not asking you for money. I'm just trying to explain why I have to leave. Why I'm breaking my promise to you. I'm not asking for... How much does your father need? Michael repeated, his voice firmer now. Sir, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm asking. How much? $35,000, Ethan whispered. But that's an impossible amount. That's more than my family makes in a year. I don't have any way to pay you back. I don't. Michael held up a hand, stopping him. His expression had shifted to something Ethan couldn't quite read, determination mixed with something deeper, more personal. Ethan, I'm going to tell you something important about wealth and what it's really for, Michael said, his voice carrying a weight that made Ethan stop spiraling and just listen. Michael walked to the window, looking out at the sunrise beginning to paint Los Angeles in shades of gold and pink. When he turned back, there was something raw and vulnerable in his expression. When I was 15 years old, your age, my father had an accident at the garment factory where he worked. A machine malfunction. He nearly lost his arm. The surgery he needed to save full function was experimental, expensive, not covered by his basic insurance. Ethan felt his breath catch. We couldn't afford it, Michael continued, his voice thick with old pain. We tried everything, loans, fundraising, begging doctors for payment plans. But we couldn't come up with the money in time. My father got the standard treatment. It saved his arm, technically. But he never regained full use of it. He lived the rest of his life in chronic pain, unable to do the skilled work he'd trained for, relegated to basic factory jobs that barely kept us afloat. Michael's eyes met Ethan's directly. I swore that if I ever had the means to prevent another family from facing that choice, the choice between bankruptcy and a loved one's health, I would do it. No hesitation. No calculation of return on investment. Just helping because I could, because I knew exactly what you're feeling right now. He pulled out his phone. What hospital is your father in? Bronx, Lebanon Medical Center, Ethan said, barely able to process what was happening. Michael began dialing. And what's your mother's full name? Maria Elena Johnson. As Ethan watched in stunned disbelief, Michael made a phone call that would change everything. "This is Michael Harrington. I need you to connect me with Bronx, Lebanon Medical Center's billing department immediately." "Yes, I know it's 6 a.m. This is an emergency. Tell them it's regarding emergency surgery for James Johnson and that I'm authorizing full payment." Ethan felt his knees go weak. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "Yes, I'll hold," Michael said, then covered the phone and looked at Ethan. "What's your father's full name and date of birth?" "James Robert Johnson. March 15, 1978. Michael relayed the information, then waited while the hospital presumably pulled up records and verified information. Ethan stood frozen, unable to believe this was actually happening. "Yes, I'm authorizing payment for the experimental vascular surgery. The full amount, $35,000. The pause. Wire transfer from Harrington Capital Management directly to the hospital. I'll have my attorney send the authorization within the hour. The surgery should proceed as soon as the medical team is ready. No payment plan necessary. Full payment." Another pause. "Yes, that's correct. Full payment today." Michael ended the call and immediately dialed another number. "Jennifer? I need you at the suite immediately. Bring the emergency authorization documents. We're wiring $35,000 to Bronx, Lebanon Medical Center for emergency surgery. I don't care what time it is in New York. Make it happen." He hung up and turned to Ethan, who was now openly crying, his whole body shaking. "Mr. Harrington, I can't. I don't know how to." "You don't need to," Michael said firmly. "Call your mother. Tell her the surgery is paid for. Tell her your father is going to get the treatment he needs." With shaking hands, Ethan called his mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice hoarse from crying. "Mijo? Are you on your way home?" "Mom, the surgery is paid for." Silence. Then, "What? Ethan, what are you talking about?" "Mr. Harrington, the man I've been helping, he's paying for Dad's surgery. All of it. $35,000. The hospital should be calling you any minute to confirm." His mother made a sound that was half sob, half disbelief. "Ethan, that's not. We can't accept that kind of money from." Michael gently took the phone from Ethan's hand. "Mrs. Johnson? This is Michael Harrington. Your son has been helping me care for my daughter over the past 2 days. And in that time, I've learned more about his character, his genius, and his heart than I've learned about most people I've known for years. Your family's investment in Ethan's education and dreams has inspired me. Please let me invest in your family's health. No repayment necessary. No strings attached. Just one father helping another father get the medical care he needs." Whatever Maria said in response made Michael smile. "Yes, ma'am. He's an extraordinary young man. You should be very proud." He paused, listening. "The surgery will proceed as soon as possible. The doctors have my direct number if they need anything. Your job is to be with your husband and take care of your family. Ethan's job is to win that robotics competition." He handed the phone back to Ethan, who was now crying so hard he could barely see. "Mom. Mijo, I don't have words. I don't. Tell Mr. Harrington thank you. Tell him we'll never forget this. Tell him. He knows, ma. Take care of Dad. I'll call you after the competition." "After the competition?" Maria said, confused. "You're still competing?" Ethan looked at Michael, who was watching him with an expression of certainty and compassion. "Yes," Ethan said, feeling something shift in his chest. "Yes, I'm still competing. And Mom? I'm going to win." After he hung up, Ethan stood in the middle of the luxury suite, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name: gratitude, relief, disbelief, determination, hope. Mr. Harrington, I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to ever repay. You already have, Michael interrupted. You showed me what matters. You chose family over ambition. You were willing to sacrifice everything for someone you love. That's not weakness, Ethan. That's the kind of character that can't be taught or bought. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Now go back to USC. Go to that competition. And show them what a kid from the Bronx can do when he doesn't have to carry the weight of impossible choices alone. As Ethan headed toward the door, Michael called out one more time. Ethan? Your father is going to be fine. The surgery will work. And you're going to win that scholarship. I believe that with absolute certainty. Ethan nodded, unable to speak, and walked out into the morning sunshine, his world completely transformed in the span of 30 minutes. The crisis wasn't over. His father still faced surgery, the competition still loomed, but for the first time since that 2:47 a.m. phone call, Ethan felt like breathing was possible again. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and emotion, he felt something else stirring, the fierce determination to prove that Michael's faith in him, his family's faith in him, his community's faith in him, was justified. Today he would compete. And today he would win. Robert drove Ethan back to USC in silence, sensing that the young man in the back seat needed space to process what had just happened. Ethan stared out the window at Los Angeles passing by, the same streets he'd driven down yesterday, but everything looked different now. Brighter. More possible. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from his mother, his sisters, even neighbors in his building who had somehow already heard the news. Pastor Williams had texted, God works through people, Mijo. Now go show them what faith looks like in action. At 7:30 a.m., Ethan walked into the USC Robotics Center carrying a weight that had been lifted and a fire that had been ignited. His eyes were still red from crying, but his jaw was set with determination that bordered on fierce. He found Workstation 47, where Rise 1 waited exactly as he'd left it hours ago when he thought he'd never see it again. He ran his hand over the salvaged components, the recycled frame, the duct tape repairs, and felt a surge of pride instead of shame. This robot, built from trash and determination, represented everything he'd fought for. Everything his family had sacrificed for. Everything Michael had just made possible. Brandon from Silicon Valley Academy noticed Ethan's arrival and approached cautiously. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by something more genuine. Hey, Brandon said. I heard you might not be competing today. Glad you're here. It wouldn't be the same without you. Ethan looked up, surprised. Thanks. Listen, about what I said before, about your robot being trash. I was being a jerk. Your navigation algorithm yesterday was brilliant. Simple but brilliant. Brandon extended his hand. May the best robot win. Ethan shook it, feeling something shift. May the best robot win. At 9:45 a.m., Dr. Raymond Mitchell called all competitors to the main presentation area. 200 students from around the world gathered around the massive obstacle course that would determine their futures. Welcome to the final day of competition, Dr. Mitchell announced. Today's challenge consists of 3 parts, each testing different aspects of disaster response robotics. Part 1. Navigation through complex obstacles. Part 2. Victim location and resource delivery. Part 3. He paused dramatically. Well, you'll see when you get there. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. The unknown third challenge was making every competitor nervous. You'll compete in groups of 5, rotating through the 3 challenge stations. Judges will score based on speed, accuracy, innovation, and, most importantly, real-world applicability. Remember, we're not just testing technical skill. We're testing your understanding of what disaster response actually means. Dr. Patricia Chin stood with the other judges, her tablet ready, her eyes sharp and evaluating. Ethan noticed she was watching him with particular interest. At 10 a.m. exactly, the first group was called. Ethan was in Group 3, which meant he had about 40 minutes to watch other competitors and learn from their approaches. The South Korean team went first in the navigation challenge. Their sleek robot moved with impressive speed and precision, its advanced sensors mapping the environment in real time. It completed the course in 3 minutes and 12 seconds, fast, efficient, technical perfection. But then came the victim location challenge, and their robot struggled. The sensors that worked so well for navigation couldn't effectively differentiate between simulated victims and debris that had similar thermal and visual signatures. After several false identifications, they completed the challenge in 7 minutes, respectable but not dominant. The Silicon Valley Academy team went next. Brandon's robot featured the most expensive components in the competition, and it showed. Navigation was flawless. Victim location was accurate. They were the team to beat. Then came Group 3's turn, and Ethan stepped up to the starting position with Rise 1. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Mitchell said, reading from his tablet. "Your robot specifications indicate you used primarily salvaged and recycled components. Can you explain your design philosophy before you begin?" Ethan took a breath, feeling the weight of 200 competitors and dozens of judges watching him. "My robot was designed with one principle: real disasters don't come with unlimited budgets or perfect conditions. Rise 1 can be built for under $500 using materials available anywhere in the world. It can be repaired with common tools. And it prioritizes reliability over sophistication, because in actual emergencies, a simple robot that works is better than a complex robot that fails." Dr. Chen made a note on her tablet, a small smile playing at her lips. "Proceed when ready," Dr. Mitchell said. Ethan activated Rise 1 and watched his creation enter the obstacle course. It wasn't the fastest. The South Korean robot had been quicker. It wasn't the most elegant. Brandon's robot moved with programmed grace. But Rise 1 was steady, reliable, adaptive. When other robots had hesitated at decision points, analyzing multiple options, Rise 1 simply chose a path and committed. When it encountered unexpected obstacles, it adjusted without freezing. Its simple sensors and straightforward programming meant fewer things could go wrong. Navigation, 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Slower than the leaders, but solid. Then came victim location, and Rise 1's design philosophy paid off. While expensive thermal sensors struggled with false positives, Rise 1 used a simpler approach: motion detection combined with basic shape recognition. It identified the simulated victims quickly and accurately, delivering supply packages with precision. Victim location, 4 minutes and 55 seconds. Not the fastest, but one of the most accurate. Ethan allowed himself a cautious hope. He was competitive. Not dominating, but definitely in the running. Then Dr. Mitchell announced the third challenge, and everything changed. Part 3 tests something we haven't evaluated before: collaborative rescue operations. In real disasters, robots must work together, share information, and coordinate efforts. Your final challenge requires teams of robots to cooperate to rescue a victim trapped in a situation no single robot can handle alone. The obstacle course transformed before their eyes. A section of the disaster zone opened up to reveal a complex scenario: a simulated victim trapped under debris that was too heavy for one robot to move, located in a space too confined for larger robots to access, requiring simultaneous actions from multiple angles. "You'll work in pairs," Dr. Mitchell continued, "each pair drawn randomly. Your robots must communicate, coordinate, and complete the rescue together. Both robots must succeed for either to receive points." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Rise one wasn't designed for robot-to-robot communication. Most robots here weren't. This was completely unexpected. The random pairing was announced. Ethan was paired with Brandon's Silicon Valley Academy team. Brandon approached, looking stressed. Our robot has communication capabilities, but we've never tested collaborative operations. How about yours? Basic signal transmission, Ethan admitted. Nothing sophisticated. We'll figure it out, Brandon said, and Ethan appreciated the we, instead of competitive hostility. They had 15 minutes to program their robots for collaboration. Around them, other pairs worked frantically. The South Korean team was arguing with their partners from Texas. The German team looked completely lost. Ethan and Brandon huddled over their laptops, trying to create a simple communication protocol their robots could share. Your navigation algorithm is better than ours for tight spaces, Brandon admitted. What if your robot handles the confined area approach while ours handles the heavy lifting? That could work, Ethan agreed. We just need to synchronize timing. They coded quickly, tested twice, and hoped for the best. When their turn came, both robots entered the challenge zone. For the first 30 seconds, it worked beautifully. Rise, one navigated the confined space while Brandon's robot positioned itself to lift debris. They were coordinating, communicating, succeeding. Then Brandon's robot malfunctioned. A servo motor, one of those expensive, high-performance components, simply seized up. Brandon's robot froze mid-operation, its arm locked in position, blocking the entire rescue path. No, 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 Brandon muttered, frantically trying to send reset commands. Nothing worked. The judges watched impassively. This was part of the challenge, dealing with unexpected failures. Ethan stared at the frozen robot blocking the rescue path. Rise, one was positioned perfectly to continue the rescue, but it couldn't proceed with Brandon's robot in the way. According to the rules, both robots had to succeed. If Brandon's robot couldn't complete its part, they both failed. Ethan could hear the timer counting down. 45 seconds remaining. He thought about the competition, about the MIT scholarship, about everything riding on this moment. Then he thought about his father in a hospital bed, about Michael paying $35,000 to save his life, about what disaster response actually meant. And he made a decision that would cost him everything, or prove everything. Rise, one, new priority, Ethan commanded through his control interface. Repair auxiliary robot. Abandon rescue mission. Brandon's head whipped around. What? Ethan, no. You'll forfeit your points. But Ethan was already reprogramming. Rise, one backed out of the confined space and approached Brandon's malfunctioning robot. Using its simple manipulator arm, Rise, one accessed Brandon's robot's servo control panel, thankfully, a standard interface. 30 seconds. Rise 1's basic tools weren't designed for robot repair, but Ethan had built it to be adaptable. Using a simple reset sequence that Ethan transmitted, Rise 1 forced a hard reboot of Brandon's robot's motor control system. 20 seconds. Brandon's robot jerked back to life. Its servo motor unlocked. It was functional again. Complete the mission, Ethan shouted. 15 seconds. Brandon's robot lifted the debris. Rise 1 rushed back into the confined space. Together, they extracted the simulated victim. 10 seconds. Both robots delivered the victim to the safe zone simultaneously. 5 seconds. Mission complete. The timer hit 0 just as both robots crossed the finish line. The entire competition center fell silent. Dr. Chen stood up from the judges' table, staring at Ethan with an expression of complete amazement. Mr. Johnson, you just sacrificed your individual performance to repair a competing robot. Why? Ethan, still breathing hard from the tension, met her eyes directly. In real disasters, ma'am, The goal isn't individual success or beating competitors. The goal is saving lives. If my robot can help another robot succeed at the rescue mission, that's what it should do. A rescued victim doesn't care which robot gets credit. The silence stretched for another moment. Then someone in the audience started clapping. Then another. Then the entire competition center erupted in applause. Students who had been competing against each other for 3 days stood and applauded. Judges nodded with approval. Even Dr. Mitchell, who was supposed to maintain professional neutrality, was smiling broadly. Dr. Chen walked across the competition floor directly to Ethan, ignoring protocol entirely. "Mr. Johnson, I've been judging robotics competitions for 15 years. I've seen technical brilliance, innovative designs, sophisticated programming. But what I just witnessed was something far more rare and valuable, a demonstration of engineering ethics that puts human need above personal glory. That was the most impressive thing I've ever seen in this competition." Brandon approached Ethan and, without a word, pulled him into a hug. "You saved our run. You sacrificed your individual score to help us. I don't even know what to say." "Say you do the same thing," Ethan replied. "That's what collaboration means." At 2 p.m., after all teams had completed the 3 challenges, Dr. Mitchell called everyone to the main stage for results. Ethan stood with the other competitors, his heart pounding. He'd done what he believed was right, but he also knew that sacrificing time to repair Brandon's robot had cost him crucial points in the individual rankings. The MIT scholarship, the full ride that could change his entire life, might have just slipped through his fingers because he chose ethics over strategy. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother: "Surgery successful. Dad is in recovery. Doctor says he'll make full recovery." We're all crying with joy. "How's competition?" Ethan smiled through his own tears. Whatever happened with the competition, his father was alive. That was the only result that truly mattered. "Before we announce the winners," Dr. Mitchell said, his voice carrying through the packed center, "I want to acknowledge that this year's competition revealed something unexpected. We designed the collaborative challenge to test technical communication between robots. But Mr. Ethan Johnson showed us that the most important kind of collaboration isn't technical, it's ethical." He gestured to Ethan. When faced with the choice between individual success and collective mission completion, Mr. Johnson chose the mission. He chose saving lives over winning points. In doing so, he demonstrated the exact kind of thinking we need in engineers who will design disaster response systems. Dr. Chen stepped forward. "The judges have deliberated, and we've made a decision that we've never made before in this competition's history. We're adding a new scoring category: collaborative engineering ethics. This category evaluates not just whether robots can work together, but whether engineers understand that technology exists to serve human need, not personal glory." Ethan felt his breath catch. In third place, Dr. Mitchell announced, "With outstanding technical performance and gracious collaboration under pressure, the Silicon Valley Academy team." Brandon and his teammates went to the stage to accept their trophy, and Brandon made a point of nodding to Ethan with genuine respect. In second place, with exceptional technical sophistication and flawless execution, the International Academy of Tokyo. The Korean team accepted their trophy with grace, bowing formally. And now for first place. Dr. Mitchell paused, looking directly at Ethan. This decision was unanimous among all judges. With perfect scores in innovation, functionality, real-world applicability, and the newly established category of collaborative engineering ethics. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear. The winner of the USC National Robotics Championship, recipient of a full scholarship to MIT including living expenses and a research position at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. "Please," Ethan thought. "Please." Ethan Johnson from the Bronx, New York. The world exploded. The entire competition center erupted in a standing ovation that felt like an earthquake. Students were shouting, judges were applauding, and Ethan stood frozen in disbelief until Brandon physically pushed him toward the stage. Ethan walked forward in a daze, tears streaming down his face, barely able to process what was happening. Dr. Mitchell handed him a trophy that felt impossibly heavy. Dr. Chen presented him with a certificate that read, "Full Scholarship to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Class of 2029. "Congratulations, Mr. Johnson," Dr. Chen said, shaking his hand firmly. "I look forward to working with you in my robotics lab. You've just earned yourself a research position starting the day you arrive on campus." Ethan opened his mouth to thank her, to say something appropriate, but all that came out was a sob of pure joy and relief and overwhelming emotion. From the audience, he heard a familiar sound, a baby's laugh. He looked out and saw Michael Harrington standing near the back, holding Lily, both of them clapping enthusiastically. Michael had come. Despite his crucial investor meetings, despite everything else on his plate, he'd come to watch Ethan compete. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Michael nodded once, a gesture that said more than words ever could. That evening, Michael hosted a celebration dinner in his penthouse suite. The guest list was small but significant: Ethan, Dr. Chen, Dr. Mitchell, Brandon, and two of his teammates who wanted to apologize for their earlier behavior, and of course, Lily, who had become the unofficial mascot of the celebration. To Ethan, Michael said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, "Who showed us all that the most important innovations aren't technical, they're human." To Ethan, everyone echoed. Dr. Chen pulled Ethan aside during dinner. "I want to discuss your research position at MIT. I've been developing prosthetic technologies for underserved populations, and your design philosophy aligns perfectly with our lab's mission. I've seen your work on the affordable prosthetic arm for your father. That's exactly the kind of practical engineering we need." "You know about that?" Ethan asked, surprised. "I make it my business to know about exceptional students," she replied with a smile. "When you arrive at MIT, I want you to lead a team developing low-cost assistive technologies. Paid research position, published papers, the works. You'll be the youngest team leader in the lab's history, but you've more than earned it." Ethan felt dizzy with the reality of what was being offered. Not just a scholarship, a career path, a purpose, a way to use his skills to help people like his father, like his community, like everyone who needed technology but couldn't afford it. Later, as the party wound down and guests departed, Ethan sat on the floor with Lily, building block towers for her to knock down while Michael handled a few final business calls. His phone rang. A video call from his mother. Ethan answered, and suddenly his entire family filled the screen. His mother, his sisters, his grandmother who had stayed with them during the crisis. And there, sitting up in a hospital bed, looking tired but alive and smiling, was his father. "There's my champion," James said, his voice weak but filled with pride. "Let me see that trophy." Ethan held up the trophy, and his sisters screamed with excitement. Marcus appeared on screen, pressing his face close to the camera. "You won. You won." "I won, buddy," Ethan confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I won." "Me, Joe, we watched the live stream," his mother said, tears streaming down her face. "When you stopped to fix that other robot, I thought you were crazy. Then I realized you were being exactly who we raised you to be. We're so proud of you." His father's expression became more serious. "Son, Mr. Harrington told me what happened this morning. Told me about you trying to give up the competition to come home. Told me about—" He couldn't finish, his own emotions overwhelming him. "I don't have words for what he did for us, what you've accomplished. But I need you to understand something." "What, Dad?" "Your success isn't just yours. It belongs to everyone who believed in you, everyone who invested in you. Mr. Chen at the bodega, Pastor Williams, Mrs. Rodriguez at the library, every neighbor who donated to your GoFundMe. You carried their dreams with you, and you made those dreams real. That's not just winning a competition, son. That's changing what's possible for an entire community. Michael appeared beside Ethan, having finished his call. James saw him on screen and his expression transformed. "Mr. Harrington," James said, his voice breaking, "I don't have the words. You saved my life. You gave my son his future. How does a man thank someone for that?" Michael smiled gently. By raising an extraordinary young man like Ethan. By teaching him that helping others is more important than personal glory. By showing him what character looks like. "You already thanked me, Mr. Johnson. You raised a son who embodies everything good that people can be." The call continued for another 20 minutes, with Ethan's sisters demanding to see every detail of the trophy, his grandmother blessing everyone in Spanish, and Marcus repeatedly asking when he was coming home. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet suite, watching the Los Angeles lights twinkle below, holding his trophy and his MIT scholarship certificate, processing everything that had happened in the past 4 days. "Overwhelmed?" Michael asked, settling onto the couch with Lily sleeping against his shoulder. "Completely," Ethan admitted. 4 days ago, I was on a plane trying to help a crying baby. Now I'm going to MIT, my father's alive, my family's future is secure, and I have a research position developing prosthetic technologies. It doesn't feel real." "It's real," Michael assured him. "And Ethan? This is just the beginning. The MIT scholarship opens doors you haven't even imagined yet. Dr. Chen's research lab will give you resources and connections that will amplify everything you can do. Your story, a kid from the Bronx building robots from trash and winning national championships, that's going to inspire thousands of other kids who thought these opportunities weren't for them." "I don't know if I'm ready for all that," Ethan said quietly. "You're ready," Michael replied with certainty. "You've been ready your whole life. You just needed someone to open the door." Ethan looked at this man who had changed everything, who had paid for his father's surgery without hesitation, who had mentored him and believed in him, who had shown him that wealth could be used for more than accumulation. "Mr. Harrington, how do I pay this forward? How do I make sure other kids get the same chances I'm getting?" Michael smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd been waiting for exactly that question. "Funny you should ask. I've been thinking about that foundation initiative we discussed. The one where you wanted half your earnings to go toward funding robotics programs in your neighborhood. What if we expanded that? What if Harrington Capital Foundation created a nationwide program specifically for talented students from underserved communities? Scholarships, mentorship, resources, connections, everything you needed but scaled to help hundreds of students." He pulled out his tablet and showed Ethan a document. "I've asked my foundation team to develop this proposal. It's called the Johnson Initiative for STEM Excellence. Named after you. A program that identifies brilliant kids who lack resources and gives them everything they need to succeed." Ethan stared at the proposal, seeing line items for scholarships, mentorship programs, equipment grants, competition funding, research opportunities. "You want to name it after me?" "You're the proof of concept," Michael said. "You're living evidence that extraordinary talent exists everywhere, regardless of zip code or bank account. Your story will open doors for kids who look like you, who come from where you come from, who have dreams but lack pathways." "I'm in," Ethan said without hesitation. "Whatever you need from me, speaking at events, mentoring students, helping design the program, I'm in." "I was hoping you'd say that," Michael replied. "Welcome to your next challenge, Ethan. You just won a robotics competition. Now let's change the entire system that makes competitions like that inaccessible to talented kids. As midnight approached and Ethan prepared to return to USC for one final night before flying home, Michael walked him to the door. "Tomorrow you fly back to New York," Michael said. "Back to your family, your father's recovery, your neighborhood celebrating your victory." "But Ethan, this isn't goodbye. This is the beginning of a partnership that's going to last years. The Johnson Initiative launches in 6 months, and I need you involved from the ground up. MIT starts in a year, and I want you spending summers working with the foundation. Your voice, your perspective, your experience, that's what will make this program actually work." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight and honor of what was being offered. "And one more thing," Michael added, his expression becoming more personal. "Thank you for showing me what really matters. For days ago, I was a billionaire who thought success meant closing deals and accumulating wealth. Now I understand that real success means using resources to create opportunities for people who deserve them. You didn't just calm my daughters crying on that plane. You reminded me what it means to be human." As Ethan rode the elevator down from the penthouse, trophy in his backpack and scholarship certificate carefully folded in his pocket, he thought about everything that had happened since that moment on Flight 847 when he'd made the terrifying decision to approach a stranger in first class. He'd done the unthinkable, not just calming a billionaire's crying baby, but proving that compassion, character, and courage could open doors that seemed permanently locked. Tomorrow he would go home to the Bronx, to his neighborhood that had invested in his dream, to his father recovering in a hospital bed, to his family that had sacrificed everything to give him chances. But he wouldn't be going home as the same person who left. He was going home as a national champion, a future MIT researcher, a catalyst for systematic change that would help thousands of kids after him. The crying had stopped. The competition was won. The surgery was successful. And the real story, the story of what happens when talent meets opportunity, when desperation meets compassion, when a 15-year-old from the Bronx refuses to accept that circumstances should limit dreams, that story was just beginning. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan glittered with the kind of wealth and influence that could reshape entire industries with a single conversation. 500 guests, business leaders, philanthropists, educators, politicians, filled tables draped in white linen, their collective net worth exceeding several small nations' GDP. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over designer gowns and custom tuxedos, over champagne flutes and carefully cultivated networks of power. But tonight's event was different from the typical charity gala circuit. Tonight, the Harrington Capital Foundation wasn't just raising money. Tonight, they were announcing a revolution. And standing backstage, adjusting the tie of his first tailored suit, a perfectly fitted Tom Ford that Michael had insisted on buying him, 16-year-old Ethan Johnson tried to remember how to breathe. "You're going to be amazing," said a familiar voice behind him. Ethan turned to see Michael Harrington, looking relaxed and confident in his own tuxedo, holding 1-year-old Lily on his hip. The baby had grown from the 6-month-old he'd calmed on that fateful flight into a toddler with her father's eyes and an infectious giggle that could light up any room. "Mr. Harrington, there are 500 people out there," Ethan said, his voice tight with nerves. "Business executives, university presidents, people who control billions of dollars. What if I mess this up?" "Then you'll mess it up authentically," Michael replied calmly. "But you won't. You know why? Because you're not performing for them. You're sharing truth. And truth doesn't require perfection. It just requires honesty." Lily reached toward Ethan, making grabbing motions with her tiny hands and babbling, Ethan," her approximation of his name that never failed to make him smile. Ethan took her for a moment, and Lily immediately relaxed against him, her head on his shoulder. Even after 6 months, even though she had full-time nannies and all the care money could provide, Lily still recognized Ethan as someone special. Someone safe. "See," Michael said softly. "She knows. She's always known. Now go show everyone else what she already understands, that you're extraordinary." At 7:30 p.m., the lights dimmed and Dr. Margaret Foster, the Foundation's executive director, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for what promises to be a transformative moment in educational philanthropy. 6 months ago, our founder Michael Harrington had an encounter on an airplane that changed his perspective on what our foundation could achieve. Tonight, we're honored to introduce you to the young man at the center of that encounter, who has since become not just a scholarship recipient, but a partner in reimagining how we identify and support exceptional talent." She paused, her smile warm. "Please welcome MIT student, National Robotics Champion, and the newest board member of the Harrington Capital Foundation, Ethan Johnson." The applause was polite but measured as Ethan walked onto the stage. He could feel 500 pairs of eyes evaluating him, judging whether this 16-year-old in a borrowed world deserved to be here among Manhattan's elite. Then he reached the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, and remembered his grandmother's words, "When you speak truth with a good heart, me Joe, the right people will listen." 6 months ago, Ethan began, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I was a 15-year-old kid from the South Bronx who got on an airplane for the first time in my life. I was heading to a robotics competition in Los Angeles, carrying a robot I'd built from trash and recycled electronics, funded by bake sales and donations from neighbors who could barely afford their own bills." He paused, letting that reality sink in. "On that flight, I heard a baby crying. For hours. I knew I could help. I'd learned techniques caring for my colicky baby brother because my family couldn't afford specialists. But I was terrified to approach the father. I was a black teenager from economy class, and he was a white billionaire in first class. I knew how that could go wrong. I knew the assumptions people might make." The room had gone completely quiet. But I approached anyway, because I'd been taught that when you can help someone, you help them. Period. You don't calculate risk or reward. You just help. Ethan looked directly at Michael, who sat at the head table with Rebecca and Lily. That billionaire was Michael Harrington. That crying baby was his daughter Lily. And that single decision, to choose compassion over fear, changed my entire life. He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, a photo of himself at USC, holding his homemade robot. "In the 6 months since that flight, here's what's happened. My father, James, who had been disabled from a construction accident, received emergency surgery that saved his life and restored significant function to his arm. That surgery cost $35,000 that my family didn't have. Michael paid for it without hesitation, without asking for repayment, because he understood what it meant to watch someone you love suffer due to financial circumstances beyond your control." The next slide showed his father at work, consulting on accessibility design for a major construction company. "Today, my father works as a consultant for disability accessibility programs, helping design construction sites that are safer for all workers. He uses the prosthetic arm I designed for him, a $500 device made from recycled materials that provides functionality comparable to $50,000 prosthetics. That's not just my father's second chance. That's proof that life-changing technology doesn't have to be financially devastating." A photo of his mother in nursing scrubs, smiling at the camera. "My mother, Maria, worked double shifts as a hospital janitor to support our family. Now, she works one job and is enrolled in nursing school, funded by a Harrington Foundation scholarship. In 2 years, she'll be an RN, tripling her earning potential and pursuing the career she'd always dreamed of but thought was impossible. His younger siblings in a bright, well-equipped classroom. My younger siblings, Jasmine, Keisha, and Marcus, are enrolled in enriched STEM programs funded by the Harrington Johnson Initiative. They're learning robotics, coding, engineering. They're dreaming bigger than any of us thought possible because they now see those dreams as achievable, not just fantasies for other people's children. Ethan's standing in an MIT lab, wearing safety goggles and holding a complex prosthetic device. And me? Ethan smiled. I received early admission to MIT. I'm currently working in Dr. Patricia Chen's robotics lab, developing affordable assistive technologies for underserved populations. My competition robot, the one built from trash, is now displayed in MIT's museum as an example of resource-constrained innovation. The same robot that Silicon Valley kids mocked is now teaching MIT students that limitation can drive innovation. The audience was leaning forward now, engaged in a way they hadn't been at the beginning. But here's what I want you to understand, Ethan said, his voice growing more intense. None of this happened because I'm uniquely special. It happened because someone with resources chose to see potential instead of circumstance. It happened because Michael Harrington understood that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. A map of the United States with 47 points highlighted. In the past 6 months, the Harrington Foundation has identified 47 students like me. Brilliant kids from underserved communities who have the talent and drive to succeed but lack the resources and connections to make it happen. 47 future engineers, doctors, scientists, entrepreneurs who were invisible to traditional scholarship programs because they didn't fit conventional profiles of deserving students. Ethan's voice grew stronger. Tonight, I'm honored to announce that the Harrington Capital Foundation is launching the Hidden Genius Initiative, a $50 million program dedicated to finding and supporting exceptional students from underrepresented communities across the nation. The room erupted in applause. Ethan waited for it to quiet before continuing. This isn't traditional charity. This is systematic change. The Hidden Genius Initiative will provide full scholarships, mentorship from industry professionals, research opportunities, internships, and most importantly, a network of support that ensures students don't just get into college, but thrive once they're there. The program's comprehensive framework appeared on the screen. We're partnering with community organizations, churches, barbershops, libraries, the places where hidden geniuses actually exist, not just the places where traditional gatekeepers look for them. We're creating pathways from neighborhoods like mine to institutions like MIT. We're proving that zip codes don't determine potential. Ethan paused, gathering his courage for what came next. I'm also honored to announce that I've been asked to serve on the Harrington Foundation Board, the youngest board member in the foundation's history. Not as a token or a symbol, but as an active partner in designing programs that actually work for students like me. Because the people closest to the problems are often closest to the solutions. More applause, but Ethan raised his hand gently to continue. Finally, in partnership with USC, we're creating an annual robotics competition specifically for under-resourced schools. The Lily Harrington Fellowship for Innovation in STEM will provide full funding for teams from low-income communities to compete, including equipment grants, travel expenses, and mentorship. Because talent deserves a stage, regardless of who can afford the ticket price. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Ethan looked out at 500 of the most influential people in New York City, people who could write checks that would change lives, who could open doors that seemed permanently locked, and he saw something shift in their expressions. They weren't just politely applauding a feel-good story. They were recognizing a paradigm shift. 6 months ago, Ethan concluded, his voice thick with emotion, I was terrified to walk into first class. I thought people like you would only see a poor black kid who didn't belong. But Michael Harrington saw a problem solver, an innovator, a partner. He saw past circumstance to potential. Tonight, I'm asking all of you to do the same. To look beyond traditional metrics of merit. To recognize that genius exists everywhere, waiting for someone to notice. To invest not just in students who already have advantages, but in students who will use those advantages to lift entire communities. He looked directly at Michael. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for teaching me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. They can only be recognized, nurtured, and shared. As Ethan left the stage, the applause was thunderous. Michael took the stage next, and Ethan watched from the wings as the man who had changed his life addressed the crowd. Ethan told you about what happened on that airplane, Michael began. But he left out something important. When he approached me about my crying daughter, I was at my lowest point. Exhausted, overwhelmed, completely defeated by circumstances I couldn't control. I'd tried everything money could buy, and none of it worked. He paused, his expression becoming more vulnerable than Ethan had ever seen in public. Then a 15-year-old kid from economy class did what trained professionals and expensive consultants couldn't do. He solved my problem with knowledge he'd taught himself at a public library because his family couldn't afford specialists. In that moment, I learned something that has fundamentally changed how I think about success, investment, and what really matters. Michael's voice grew stronger. The best investments aren't measured in financial returns. They're measured in lives changed, in potential realized, in barriers broken. Ethan Johnson didn't just calm my daughter, he reminded me what wealth is actually for. Images of the 47 students the foundation had identified appeared on the screen, a diverse collection of faces representing every corner of America. These are our hidden geniuses. 47 students identified in just 6 months. Imagine what we could find with more resources, more partnerships, more people committed to looking beyond traditional pipelines. Imagine what America could become if we actually invested in all our talented students, not just the ones born into the right zip codes. Michael's gaze swept the audience. Every person in this room has benefited from opportunity at some point in their journey. Someone opened a door for you. Someone took a chance on you. Tonight, I'm asking you to do the same for the next generation. Not as charity, but as investment in America's actual future. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Checkbooks were already emerging at tables throughout the ballroom. Then Michael smiled and added, "But before we move to the fundraising portion of the evening, I have a surprise for Ethan." Ethan's heart began racing. This wasn't in the program. Ethan told you about his family's transformation. But I wanted you to meet them yourselves. Because understanding where exceptional people come from helps us recognize similar potential in others. The lights shifted to illuminate a table near the front. Ethan's breath caught as he saw his entire family standing. His mother Maria in an elegant dress that Michael had clearly provided, his father James looking healthy and strong, his sisters in beautiful outfits, and his grandmother Rosa wearing traditional clothing from Jamaica and beaming with pride. But it was little Marcus who stole the show. The 2.5-year-old spotted Ethan and immediately broke free from his mother's hand, running toward the stage calling out at the top of his lungs, "E! E!" The entire ballroom watched as this tiny child in a miniature suit scrambled up the stage stairs and launched himself at his big brother. Ethan caught him, lifting Marcus high, and the toddler's pure joy, his complete trust and love, reminded every wealthy person in the room of what actually mattered beneath all the money and status. "This," Michael said, his voice carrying over the laughter and applause, "is where extraordinary comes from. From families who sacrifice everything. From communities that invest in their children even when they're struggling. From bonds of love that matter more than any amount of wealth. Then, as if the moment needed more perfection, 1-year-old Lily Harrington toddled onto the stage from the other direction, having escaped from her mother Rebecca. She walked straight to Ethan with the confidence of a child who knows she's loved, reached up her arms, and said clearly, up. Ethan, now holding both children, the toddler from the Bronx who represented where he came from, and the billionaire's daughter who represented where he was going, became a living symbol of bridging worlds that were never meant to be separate. A photographer captured the moment, a 16-year-old in his first tailored suit, holding 2 children who shouldn't have anything in common but shared his care, standing on a stage before 500 of the most influential people in New York, proof that compassion could reshape reality. That photograph would become the face of the Hidden Genius Initiative. It would appear in newspapers, magazines, foundation materials, and classrooms across America. It would show thousands of struggling students that someone who looked like them, who came from where they came from, could stand on that stage too. The gala continued for another 3 hours. Pledges poured in. $50 million became $75 million before dessert was served. Universities committed to partnership programs. Corporations offered internship pipelines. The Hidden Genius Initiative, which had been ambitious in planning, became transformative in scope. But at 11 p.m., as the event wound down and most guests departed, Ethan found himself on a balcony overlooking Central Park with Michael, both of them loosening ties and breathing in the cool November air. "You know what still amazes me?" Michael said, looking out at Manhattan's glittering skyline. "All of this started because you chose compassion over fear. You could have stayed in your economy seat. You could have let someone else deal with my crying baby. But you chose to help. And you chose to see potential instead of circumstance," Ethan replied. "You could have thanked me politely and sent me back to economy. Instead, you saw something worth investing in." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone else?" "Of course." "When you approached me on that plane, my first instinct was suspicion. A black teenager from economy approaching my baby? Every unconscious bias I didn't want to admit I had activated immediately. I almost said no. I almost waved you away." Michael's voice was heavy with the weight of that admission. If I'd followed that instinct, if I'd let fear overrule desperation, I would have missed everything that came after. The partnership. The foundation transformation. The proof that extraordinary exists in the most unexpected places. He turned to Ethan. "You saved me from my own blindness. From missing genius because it didn't look like what I expected genius to look like. And you showed me that not everyone with wealth uses it to build walls," Ethan said. "You showed me that some people understand that money is a tool, not a trophy. That success means lifting others, not just climbing higher yourself." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people from completely different worlds who had found common ground in the space between fear and compassion. "Your prosthetics research," Michael said eventually. "Dr. Chin tells me it's groundbreaking. That you're developing interfaces that could help millions of people." "It's all because of my father," Ethan replied. "Watching him struggle. Wanting to help. Understanding that disability technology is only available to the wealthy, which makes no sense because the people who most need it can least afford it. How long until it's ready for production? 2 years, maybe 3. We're refining the neural interface, improving durability, working on manufacturing processes that keep costs low. But Dr. Chin thinks we could bring a $500 prosthetic to market that outperforms devices that currently cost $50,000. That's not just innovation, Michael said. That's revolution. That's millions of people getting functionality they thought was impossible. That's your father's accident becoming the catalyst for helping millions of other disabled workers. Ethan felt the weight of that responsibility and the thrill of that potential. "Oh, and speaking of babies," Michael added with a smile, "Rebecca is pregnant. Due in 6 months. We're already joking that we'll need you on speed dial." Ethan laughed. "Anytime. Although your pediatrician might be offended that you call a 16-year-old before calling them." "My pediatrician didn't do what you did," Michael replied seriously. "You didn't just calm Lily. You gave me perspective that changed everything about how I think, how I invest, how I define success. That's worth infinitely more than pediatric credentials." Inside, the gala was winding down. Through the glass, they could see Ethan's family gathered around one of the tables, his mother talking animatedly with Dr. Chin, his father demonstrating his prosthetic arm to fascinated foundation board members, his siblings charm ing wealthy donors with their unfiltered enthusiasm. "6 months ago," Ethan said quietly, "I was terrified to walk into first class. I thought people like you would only see a poor black kid who didn't belong. I thought I'd be dismissed, rejected, maybe even accused of something. That fear almost kept me in my seat, almost made me ignore a chance to help. And 6 months ago," Michael replied, "I almost missed recognizing genius because I was too overwhelmed by my own crisis to look beyond stereotypes and assumptions. I almost let unconscious bias cost me the most important partnership of my life." "So what changed?" Ethan asked. "Desperation forced me past my prejudices," Michael admitted. "And your courage forced you past your fear. Sometimes the universe pushes us into the exact moments we need, whether we're ready or not." Ethan thought about that. About how his entire life had pivoted on a single decision made at 35,000 feet. About how millions of dollars and dozens of lives were being changed because he'd chosen compassion over self-protection. "Mr. Harrington, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "And Ethan? You're a foundation board member now, a MIT researcher, a partner in this work. Maybe it's time you called me Michael." Ethan smiled. "Michael, what happens next? With the foundation, with the Hidden Genius Initiative, with all of this?" Michael's expression became intense with vision and purpose. "We scale. The 47 students we've identified, that's just the beginning. We're building infrastructure to find thousands more. We're creating partnerships with community organizations in every major city. We're developing assessment tools that recognize potential beyond test scores and grades. We're building a pipeline from overlooked neighborhoods to elite institutions." He pulled out his phone, showing Ethan a map with hundreds of points highlighted. "These are communities we're targeting in the next year. Each one has hidden geniuses waiting to be found. Students who will cure diseases, design technologies, solve problems we haven't even imagined yet. They just need someone to see them." "And my role?" Ethan asked. "You're the proof of concept. You're the evidence that this works. You speak at schools, share your story, mentor younger students. You show them that someone who looks like them, who comes from where they come from, can stand on stages like tonight and be taken seriously as a peer, not just a charity case." Michael's voice grew more passionate. "But more than that, you design programs that actually work. You tell us what you needed that you didn't get. You point out where our unconscious biases create barriers. You make sure that as the foundation grows, it doesn't lose sight of the students it exists to serve." Inside, Ethan saw his little brother Marcus had fallen asleep in their mother's arms, exhausted from excitement. Lily was similarly passed out in Rebecca's embrace. 2 children from completely different worlds, both peaceful, both loved, both unaware that their older brother and father were plotting to reshape educational opportunity in America. "I have a confession," Ethan said. "Sometimes I still can't believe any of this is real. I keep thinking I'll wake up back in my dorm room at USC, and it will all have been a dream." "It's real," Michael assured him. The scholarship is real. The research position is real. Your father's recovery is real. The foundation transformation is real. You did this, Ethan. Not by being perfect or superhuman, but by being exactly who you are, compassionate, brilliant, courageous, and willing to help even when helping was scary. Through the glass, they saw more young people arriving, students from the Bronx who had heard Ethan was here and had come to see their neighborhood hero. Kids wearing worn sneakers and patched jackets, carrying dreams and doubt in equal measure. That's your real audience, Michael said, nodding toward them. The wealthy donors tonight will provide resources. But those kids out there, they're why the resources matter. They need to see you. Need to know that the journey from where they are to where you are is possible. Ethan nodded, understanding. I should go talk to them. Yes, you should, Michael agreed. And Ethan? Thank you. For everything. For helping Lily. For showing me what matters. For being a partner in this work. For proving that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, only recognized, nurtured, and shared. As Ethan walked back inside, toward the group of students who had come to meet him, Michael watched with satisfaction. This was what wealth was supposed to do: open doors, create opportunities, build bridges between worlds that seemed impossibly distant. Ethan spent the next hour with the students from his neighborhood, answering questions, sharing advice, posing for pictures. They asked about MIT, about the competition, about how he managed to belong in both worlds. The truth is, Ethan told them, you don't have to choose between where you came from and where you're going. You can honor both. You can take the values your community taught you, hard work, loyalty, helping others, and use them to succeed in any world. The key is staying true to who you are while being brave enough to walk through doors that seem like they weren't meant for you. A 14-year-old girl named Destiny raised her hand shyly. But Mr. Johnson, what if people don't believe we belong? What if they think we only got opportunities because of charity or diversity quotas? Ethan crouched down to her eye level. Then you prove them wrong by being so excellent they can't deny your talent. You do work so good that it speaks louder than their doubts. And you remember that you're not representing just yourself, you're opening doors for everyone who comes after you. That's not pressure to be perfect. That's motivation to be purposeful. Another student, a boy named Carlos who reminded Ethan of himself at that age, asked, "How did you stop being scared? When you walked into first class, when you competed against rich kids with better equipment, how did you get brave?" "I didn't stop being scared," Ethan admitted. "I'm still scared sometimes. Scared I'll fail, scared I'll let people down, scared I don't really belong at MIT or on foundation boards. But I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act despite fear. It's believing that what you have to offer matters more than the risk of rejection." He stood, looking at all the young faces watching him with hope and hunger for proof that their dreams weren't foolish. 6 months ago, I was sitting where you're sitting. Dreaming big but doubting whether those dreams were realistic. Then I made one brave choice, to help someone who needed help, even though it scared me. That one choice opened doors I didn't even know existed. So I'm telling you, make brave choices. Take scary chances. Walk through doors that seem closed. Because behind those doors are people like Michael Harrington, waiting to invest in your potential if you're brave enough to show it to them. As midnight approached and the last guest departed, Ethan stood in the now empty ballroom with his family, looking at the stage where he'd spoken to 500 of New York's most influential people. His mother hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Me, Joe, I'm so proud I can't even find words. You did this. You changed our family's entire future." His father, using his prosthetic arm to embrace both of them, added, "You did more than that, son. You changed what's possible for thousands of families like ours. You proved that talent exists everywhere, and wealth isn't what makes someone valuable. His grandmother Rosa, who had been mostly quiet all evening, finally spoke in her thick Jamaican accent. "When you were born, I prayed to God for you to be strong and kind. I prayed for you to use any gifts you were given to help others. Tonight I saw those prayers answered. You are exactly who I asked God to help you become." Marcus, now awake again and full of toddler energy, tugged on Ethan's pants leg. "We famous now?" Ethan laughed, picking up his little brother. "No, buddy. Not famous. Just blessed. Just lucky. Just trying to help people like you get the chances you deserve." "Like you help crying baby?" "Exactly like that." The final image of the night came as they prepared to leave. Ethan, holding Marcus on one hip, stopped to look at a photograph that had been projected on the ballroom screen throughout the evening. The image of him holding both Marcus and Lily, bridging two worlds that were never meant to be separate. That photograph would travel the world. It would appear in foundation materials, news articles, inspirational presentations. But more importantly, it would appear in classrooms and community centers in underserved neighborhoods across America, proof that the journey from struggling to thriving was possible. The billionaire's baby had cried endlessly on a plane until a poor black boy did the unthinkable, not just calming her, but revealing that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, only recognized, nurtured, and shared. And sometimes, when desperation meets compassion, when privilege meets potential, when fear is overcome by courage, the result is a transformation that ripples far beyond the original act of kindness. Flight 847 from New York to Los Angeles had carried two people whose lives would become permanently intertwined: a billionaire overwhelmed by circumstances he couldn't control, and a teenager brave enough to help when helping was scary. 6 months later, that crying baby was happy and healthy. That teenager was changing the world. And the partnership between them was proving that the distance between first class and economy, between wealth and poverty, between privilege and potential, isn't nearly as far as it seems. It's only as far as one act of compassion, one moment of courage, one decision to see people for their potential rather than their circumstances. And that distance? It can be crossed by anyone brave enough to try. The crying had stopped. The doors had opened. The ripples were spreading. And the real story, the story of what happens when we choose to see each other clearly, to help each other genuinely, to invest in potential wherever we find it, that story was just beginning. Because sometimes the most unthinkable thing isn't calming a crying baby.
It's daring to imagine that we all deserve chances, that worth isn't determined by wealth, and that the person who saves you might be the one you'd least expect, if only you have the wisdom to let them try. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If you enjoyed it and it showed you what compassion can do, you won't want to miss the next one. It's even more powerful and full of unexpected twists. Just click the video on your screen and keep the stories going.